Lesson planning does not have to be difficult. In fact, if it's done right, it's going to give you more time than you ever thought possible. Now, what I want to do in this video is I want to take you step by step on how I do a lesson. Step by step. I want to take you through the entire process from beginning to the end. I want to make sure you understand what I'm doing every step of the way, why I'm doing every step of the way, and just the thinking that goes on as I'm carrying out a lesson. The thing is going on as I'm planning. And ultimately, I want you to see how that lesson plays out in the classroom. Now, when I first started teaching 20 years ago, I remember they would say, all right, here's the subject teaching. Got it? All right. Now, the next thing is, here's the book. Got it? And I said, oh yeah, by the way, here are some standards. Okay, go for it. What? What do you mean go for it? I had to figure it all out. I mean, I'm like, okay, I got the book. I got an idea of what I'm teaching, but what do I do? What do I do for 50 minutes a day with these squirrely kids in my class? And it was a struggle. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know where to start, what to do. Do I do worksheets? Do I do notes? Do I do activities? I had absolutely no idea. And so I had to figure it out. And so this video, if you are in my shoes, 20 years ago and you're like, I have no idea where to start, this video is for you. Once again, I'm going to go in detail. It's not going to be a quick video. It's not going to be a short video by any means. It's not going to be snappy. I'm going to take the time on this video to lay it all out for you. Once again, from beginning to end. So if you were like me 20 years ago, have absolutely no idea where to start, this video is for you. Now, if you're an experienced teacher, you're like, no, I got a good system down, then still watch this video, because I guarantee you there are going to be some things in it that will have you thinking differently, and there'll be some things in it, some tips in it that are actually going to make lesson planning easier for you overall. And as Julie Andrews said in The Sound of Music, let's start at the beginning, a very good place to start.
Let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start.
Where do I start? Now that's the first thing you really got to ask yourself is what am I working with? And I think about it in time-wise. So for example, for us, we have about 36 weeks that we're teaching. So 36 weeks that we're teaching. Got it. Now, not all those weeks are going to be dedicated to teaching. Like for example, for my class, the first 2 to 3 weeks, I am strictly focused on teaching rules and procedures for the first 2 to 3 weeks. So that leaves us with about 33 weeks. And then you figure from there, you got the last week of school, you have all different activities. All right, so now we're down to 32 weeks. And then we have about 2 weeks for testing. All right, so we're down to about 30 weeks. So in my mind, when I start with lesson planning, I start with the year. Now we're gonna start big. We're gonna start with the year. So we're gonna start big, but we're gonna move it on down. So starting with that, think, at least for my case, I got 30 weeks that I'm actually going to be teaching that students can learn in those 30 weeks. Okay, so for me, I always found it best to plan a unit, a topic, a certain skill you're focusing on in 2 to 3 weeks chunks. Right? So I call that a unit. So however you want to phrase it, but I like to have that 2 to 3 units, and then at the end of the 2 to 3 weeks, and at the end of the unit, we usually do some sort of assessment. So with that said, if we got 30 weeks that we're actually teaching, that means that we get somewhere between 10 and 15 units in the entire year. And so that kind of gives me a chance for pacing, is what I call it, is pacing. So my mind, I got about, we'll say about 12 units that I'm going to cover in a year. So that's the first thing, is looking at the time frame that we have to cover things. So with that said, we have a total of 12 units in a year. Each unit is roughly 2 to 3 weeks. So this is where the question comes up. What do I have to work with? So there's 3 things. Once again, thinking about the big picture, what am I, for example, I teach history. I teach 8th grade history. We'll use my subject as an example, but whatever subject you're teaching, you kind of think the same thing in your subject matter. But history, here we go. The first thing is, I would ask myself, what's going to be on the test? The test could be maybe a district test, or it could be a state test, or maybe it's going to be a test that's agreed upon in your school. But if there's some sort of standard test that is going to be given to the students, I kind of start with that big picture in mind. Luckily for me, I'm in California. I teach social studies. As of right now, we do not have a state test for 8th grade social studies. So that gives me a little bit more freedom than most people. I was talking with one of my mentees, and he was mentioning that he's teaching geography. I said, all right, geography, what's on the state test? And said, we don't test for geography in my state. I'm like, oh my gosh. All right. Are there any standards that you have? Are there any testing that the district is going to give, or even tests that is agreed upon within the school? He says, no, I'm pretty much the only one teaching it here at my school, and there's nothing really district-wide. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, you have total freedom on what you're going to teach. So that helps the situation in it. Now, if you teach math or you teach English, I guarantee that your state is going to have some sort of thing they're going to test on for those subject matters. So kind of keep that in mind as lesson planning. So I wouldn't necessarily create curriculum around what's going to be on the test. But as you go through your curriculum, as you go through your lessons, you got to keep that in mind. They always say, don't teach to the test. All right, don't teach to the test, but they want the kids to do well in the test. So don't teach to the test, but make sure kids learn what's going to be on the test. So just keep that in mind as you go through your lessons. The next thing is probably your state has standards. Even though we don't test for social studies in California for 8th grade, we do have social study, 8th grade social studies standards. And so you want to identify those standards. Now let me show you what our standards look like here. So let me get my book real fast. So looking at the standards, here's what you're looking at. This is for 8th grade, United States History and Geography, Growth and Conflict. So you can always use this as an idea of how to do your lesson planning, and where to start at least for lesson planning. And so it tells you 8.1 is 8th grade. It tells you what it is. So here it says, students understand the major events preceding the founding of the nation and relate their significance to the development of American Constitution democracy. What? That's what I teach this stuff, and that's kind of a little too wordy for me. How about 8.2? Students analyze the political principles underlying the U.S. Constitution, compare the enumerated and implied oh my gosh. Now, could you imagine if I told students they would have to learn this stuff? They're checked out already. They are definitely checked out. So you can use this as a way of starting to lesson plan to see what you need to cover. But in my opinion, it's not the best way to do it. But let's kind of look through it. 8.1, 8.2. Let's keep kind of going through this and see what we have here. 8.3, and it keeps going, right? 8.4, 5, you got that 8.10. So there's actually, looking at the standards here, there's 12 standards. With these 12 standards, you could create lessons around each of those standards. And that's definitely doable. That's definitely doable. But the problem is the way those standards are phrased, worded, they're not very they don't give you much of an idea on what to do on a day-to-day basis. It just kind of gives you an idea like this is what the state wants you to cover. Man. So the other thing is, going through that, there may be certain things in that you want to teach, or maybe certain things that you don't want to teach. There may be certain standards in there that you know are going to be tested, and certain standards may not be tested. And so what you want to find out, first of all, what's going to be tested. Let's start with that big box. Whatever you're teaching, you want to make sure it fits in that box of this will be on the test. Now, if this is not going to be on the test, or we don't test, you can still teach it, but it gives you a better understanding of the things that you definitely do. I remember when I first started teaching, they were trying to teach us things called power standards. They said, here's all your standards, but the reality is not all these are going to be tested, or not all these are as important. So keep that in mind. So start with a big test in mind. If no test, whatever, they kind of go on to standards. It gives you a framework of what the state thinks you should be doing. But all honesty, those are the last two things I actually would focus my energy on when I'm lesson planning. If you have some sort of physical material, a book that you have, that all students have access to, that you can keep going back to day in and day out, that is what I would structure my lessons around, is that flow of that book. What is in that book? Because if in fact students are going to read that book, or you're going to keep going back to that book as a reference point, or as where you're getting your information from, that'd be a better way to focus your lessons, because it's not so wordy like the standards are. I mean, it gives you a much better way of conveying the information to the students. So with that said, here we go. Let's take a look at a book. This is my United States history book. Now, if you don't have a book, it's a little more challenging. If you don't have a book, then you kind of want to focus on standards, or focus on what you want to teach and make sure that it matches up with your standards, matches up with the test. But most of us have some sort of material or book. And so let me show you how I'd use the book to figure out my pacing. So the book starts out with Historian's Toolkit, all right? And then it has Changing Ideas in a Changing World. So those aren't necessarily 8th grade standards, but they're kind of telling the backstory of how America first started. And then the real 8th grade stuff starts with, here we go, Colonial America. That's the first one. So looking at this, I got Colonial America, the Spirit of Independence. Then I got America's Revolution, and so forth. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's count them here. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there's a total of 16 chapters or units in this book. Now going back to our pacing, we said we only got maybe about 12 units that we could cover, each one being 2 to 3 weeks. So that means I have 4 more units in the book than I actually have time for. And then this is where it takes some time to think about, what do you really want students to get? What is really important for students to walk away from this class, or your class from? What do you want them to walk away with? And this also, we go back to the standards. If there is a unit that's not really important regarding as far as covering the standards, then maybe you get rid of that one. If it's a subject you don't think it's important, maybe get rid of that one. If it's in the book, if it's a unit of the book that you think, there's not going to be tested on that, you can maybe get rid of that one. Or maybe you can combine some together. So that's something and with time, once I've been using the same book here for probably 10 years now, so we're very familiar with it. And so me and my partner here, we've gotten really good at going through this, and we know exactly what we're going to teach and when we're going to teach it. And we have a couple years of history behind us now, teaching the same thing. And so you get a good flow for it. And so the first time out the gate, it might be a little difficult, but by the second, third year, if you have the same curriculum, the same book, you're going to have it down solid. Now the other thing, we're still talking big picture here, by the way. We haven't even dove into the actual day-to-day, week-to-day, week lesson planning. We're talking big picture. So another big picture thing you want to think about. And if this is your first year, second year, third year, you maybe don't even have to tackle this question just yet, just because you're trying to go through the motions and get the rhythm and the flow of things. But big picture wise, you want to think about your philosophy on teaching. And here's what I mean. I teach 8th grade history, and I know the reality is this. You do not need to know 8th grade history to be successful in life. You don't even need to know it to be successful in college or even high school. You don't. You can flunk my class and still be successful on everything else. So if you really don't need to know 8th grade history, United States history, why am I even teaching it? When I first started teaching 20 years ago, my goal was to have students memorize as much information as possible. That was 20 years ago. And somewhere along the line, I realized that was a stupid goal. And especially today, right? You can just Google something, boop, there it goes, right? You get the answer. So then if my goal is not to have students memorize things, what is my goal? What is my purpose? What is my philosophy of teaching? Why am I have students in my class? And what do I want them to get from my class? And over time, here's a philosophy that I developed. Now, you're going to have to develop your own philosophy, because it helps answer the question. When students ask, why are we learning about this? You'll have an answer, right? So for me, what I'm hoping students get out of this class is the ability to ask questions, the ability to really formulate opinion about what they believe and don't believe. I always tell the story at the beginning of the year. I was in part of a men's accountability group, and every time I'd come to the group and I talk about something and I share one of my thoughts and beliefs, I had a gentleman in the group ask me this question. He goes, "Do you really believe what you say you believe?" Like, what are you talking about? So I'll give you an example. Let's say me and my wife were arguing that week, and I would come to the group and I would say, I'd vent to them and everything else and blah, and all this, and then he would say, "Do you love your wife?" And I said, "Of course I love my wife." He goes, "Really?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you really believe that?" I go, "Yeah, I believe that." He goes, "If you really believe that, why are you acting this way? Do you really believe what you say you believe?" And I had to stop and think. I'm like, oh, do I really believe? And it caused me to have that mental reflection, that processing, thinking, what exactly are my beliefs? What exactly is right? What exactly is wrong? And so I tell my students, in this world, when I first grew up, I was growing up as a kid, I saw the world as black and white, good, evil, happiness, sadness. But the older I got, the more I realized it's not black and white. It is the shade of gray sometimes. And we have to traverse, we have to figure out in that shade of gray, where do our beliefs start? And so that's what I tell them, we're gonna explore that gray area in this class. We're gonna learn about United States history. But what I want you to do is, as we learn about United States history, we're gonna use United States history to explore those gray areas, those topics. So for example, real quickly, what's right and wrong? We go to the question, what's right or wrong? How do you define right or wrong? How much freedom is too much freedom? Should there be limitations on our freedom? Right? How do you judge them? Do you judge somebody by their actions or not? Do you judge somebody based upon our standards or the previous standards, previous year standards? And so we go through all these questions that I ask throughout the year with the hopes, connecting it to what we're learning about in history. But my overall goal is that they're going to leave this class thinking more deeply about what their beliefs are. And then hopefully also through all that, they have a stronger foundation to go into high school and beyond that point. So that is my philosophy, but you got to determine your own philosophy. That way when a student asks you, why are we learning this? You have an answer for that because you connect that with what you want students to get out of the class. All right. So once again, if you're brand new at this teaching thing and you're still just trying to get the hang of lesson planning, you can kind of put that to the side for now. But as the years go on, start really thinking about that because that's going to help guide you on your actual individual lessons. All right. So now we got the big picture out of the way. Boom, got the big picture out of the way. Now it's time to actually dive in to the actual lesson part of it, the actual planning out what we're going to be doing each day. The thing to keep in mind with this, for me, and I think this is best for everybody, I have the big picture, meaning I can tell you in about a month what we're roughly going to be talking about. I'm not going to have each day planned out, but I know the topic. Because once again, I did that whole pacing guide, right? I figured out my entire year, what I have to teach, the units in that. So I have a rough idea within a week or two when I'm going to cover certain topics. All right. So you want to have that big picture. But then actual lesson planning for like the day-to-day of what we're going to do in that day, I usually do it the week before or about a week and a half before. So before Friday ends, I not only want to have next week planned, I want to have the other week planned beyond that as well. So I guess it's 2 weeks ahead. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Something like that. Because by having that far planned ahead, once again, it doesn't have to be set in stone, but it gives you a good idea as far as the pacing and you see. And once again, if you're planning, once again, you're planning units. You're planning units. And so when we plan, we're going to plan 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Plan 2 to 3 weeks at a time. That's our unit. And so that way things flow as smoothly as possible. So I do old-fashioned way. I still have the old paper calendar. So let me pull out the paper calendar here and show you exactly what I do when I plan out my unit, 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So once again, I'm kind of old-fashioned. You can do this, with modern technology if you want to, but for me, it's easier for me to quickly put something down on paper, and plus I just like the physical, physical hand and take a look at it whenever I need to. So the first thing you want to do is just cross out the days you are not going to be using. Obviously, I'm not going to be here. So for me, of course, and hopefully for you, and we don't have the weekend, so I'll kind of just draw a line like this right here, just to show that, of course, we're not here during the weekends. And then, of course, this like this. I mean, once in something like that. So that way I know exactly what I'm working with. Now this is for March 2024, so this is already passed. But I want to just kind of show you what I do in general to kind of lay the framework for when I do a lesson planning. And so we're talking units, and once again, our units are 2 to 3 weeks, so 2 to 3 weeks. So for this unit, once again, this has already been done, but this unit was about westward expansion, about moving west. I teach history. And it starts here on the 11th, so it starts on this day, and it's going to end on this day. All right, so now I know I got 3 weeks to work with. And so 3 weeks, 4 days, normal schedule, and then our Fridays are minimum days. So I start by blocking that out. And then the next thing I do from there is I just kind of put in, what's the word here? Events that are going to take away from the classroom. That's what we call it. So for example, for us, all our students have to take a school-wide survey. And so the day that we have to do it is the 13th. And so I'm just going to put down survey right here. All right, survey. So I know I don't have that day available. And then another thing is coming in. I have 8th graders. We have counselors coming in from the high school to go ahead and talk to our 8th grade students and get them all set up for next year. So I know that we're not going to have time on another day to do instruction, and that's going to be this day right here. So I'm going to put down counselors right there. And then the other thing I look at is fire drills. So fire drills, any kind of drills going on, or assemblies, anything like that will actually take time away from actual instruction. You want to just kind of put that on here so that way you know exactly what you're working with. And so I know on the 14th, we're going to have a fire drill during 4th period. So I'm going to put down FD 4th period. It makes it a little more complicated because I'm still able to do instruction that day, but just 4th period is going to cut a little bit into my time. So that's the first thing I do, is I just kind of cross out what time I do not have to do teaching. And now I know what I have to work with. One of the things I've created over the years is a flow, a system, a rhythm. You want to create that as well. So the sooner you get the flow, the rhythm down, you're going to find that lesson planning becomes easier because you're not recreating the wheel every single unit. So let me give you an example. I call it plug and play, plug and play. So I have a unit, 2 to 3 weeks. There are some things I do almost every single unit. So for example, I will have something called Ed Puzzles, where they are videos that students watch independently. They watch these videos independently, and as the video is playing, they answer questions. So students will be on the Chromebook during that time period, and they will basically be watching videos and answering questions. That's one plug and play I do, and I usually do that somewhere in the unit. The next thing is my notes. As I mentioned, at the beginning of the year, 2 to 3 weeks, beginning of the year, I go through all my rules, procedure, and one of the things we go through is how to take notes in this class, because that's going to be a foundation of this class. And so I usually have notes. Almost in every unit, we're taking notes one way or the other. And then, let me touch upon the notes here too. What do notes mean? I've talked to different mentees about this, and for me, notes have a couple different purposes regarding it. First one is this. Because you think about it, if I wanted the students just to have the information, I can just print out the information for them, boom, give it to them, right? But does that actually help them memorize the information? Does that actually give us opportunity to talk about what they're learning? Does it actually give them time to process it? Does it give them time? Does it give us a chance to have a classroom discussion about what we are just learning, or give my special view on it or angle on it? It doesn't. So one of the reasons I have students take notes is because it helps them retain the information a little bit better because they are actually writing down the information. And the other part is it gives us a chance as a class to communicate back and forth what we're learning about. I have something embedded in my notes called the big thinking question. And I'll say that I have other videos, I believe, that talk about how I actually do my notes. You can always take a look at that in more detail. But I have something called a big thinking question where it helps create conversation about what we're just learning. But the other reason I have students actually write notes is because I have this idea that idle hands are the devil's playground. And you want to make sure students always have something to do from beginning to end, bell to bell, right? And notes is the way of doing it. So I've noticed that some teachers I talk to, some mentees, they're telling them they're having trouble with the notes because what they do is they basically print out the notes and they just leave some spaces for students to write in the key words. But a student could zone out for the entire time for 5 minutes and just get the keyword, put it in, and zone out for another 5 minutes. And that can lead to behavior problems as well as other things, and I don't want that. So for me, I actually have students write their notes down. I use Cornell's note style. So I have the students write their notes down, and then I have them go back later on and kind of reflect about what they just learned. That's Cornell note, you can look that up. And then at the end we do a summary. So that's kind of how I have my notes set up. So back to the thing, some plug and plays I have, things I do almost every unit. I have my ed puzzles, and then I have my notes, and then I have my tests. Those are three things that are almost always, not always, like I think actually this unit coming up is not gonna be that way, but almost always those are in there. And so it works this way, here we go. So let's say Friday is a test. We'll start with Friday. Friday is a test. At the end of the test, I have students work on the next unit's ed puzzles. So we have 40 minutes on Friday. I choose test. Maybe it takes them about 20 minutes to do the test. That gives them about 20 minutes of time to watch the videos. And I want them to watch the ed puzzles before we actually get into material, because this is front loading the information. So if they can learn about it independently, when it actually comes time for us to take notes together, then they already have the background information. They already learned about it one time, and now we're taking notes. And so when we have a conversation about what we're learning about our notes, they're able to participate more because they already have some of that information that they got independently when they're working on their ed puzzles. So Friday's test, that's over, and then they start the ed puzzles for the next unit after that. Next week comes, whatever, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then we'll have notes. Notes that reinforce what they just learned on the ed puzzles. So we have that, all right? And so we have notes there. And then at the very end of the unit, we do a test, which then, once again, repeat the cycle. At the end of that test, they'll start watching ed puzzle for the next unit. And so it's a nice little flow we have there. Now, those are the kind of plug and plays. And then what I sprinkle all throughout are my activities that we have. So we have different activities. And this is where you get a little more creative. This is where you can bring in stuff that you normally wouldn't do. So some of the activities I've done this year, give you an example, might be a video. In fact, that's what this unit's coming up. It's going to be a video called The Slave Narratives, and we'll talk more about that here shortly. But it's a video, all right? And there's questions to go along with the video. I've done, just here recently, some escape room. So we've done escape rooms, or breakout EDU in a box. We're going to do something called, read a poem called Green Sally Up. So that's something. We did learn about Tecumseh, a close read on Tecumseh. That was another thing that we did. I'm trying to think what else we have. I mean, it goes back further and further than that. But so regardless of whatever activities you choose, you sprinkle those in. And so in my class, students will get the information at least 3 times, maybe 5 times during that unit. So for example, ed puzzles, they get the information once through the ed puzzles. Next one, they get the notes. So that's the second time the information. The third time is we have an activity that reinforces what they just learned. So we got, first of all, ed puzzles with the information, notes to reinforce that, and then we have the activities to reinforce all of that. So we kind of work with the material, dive deeper into it, learn more about it. And then beyond that, we have homework. Sometimes I have a whole system for homework. Another video about that if you want to watch regarding my homework. So that might be a 4th time. And then a 5th time might be a review right before the test. So a student can get the same information 5 times. It cracks me up. A student, it always happens. A student goes, hey, I learned about this, or hey, I remember this. I'm like, yeah, this is like the 5th time I was talking about it. Well, I'm glad you finally got it though, right? But regardless, so back to those things. So you got your plug and play. For me, tests, notes, and then ed puzzles, right? Those are my 3 plug and plays. Then I sprinkle in the activities beyond that point. So let me show you what that would look like in a calendar. Now this is not what I'm going to be teaching, but let me just kind of show you how that might look with those three things and what I fill it in with something else. All right, back to the calendar that we already started. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the routines, the lessons that we have set in place. One thing I call it the plug and play. It's pretty much the same lessons I have that I use over and over again, just different content. So let me show you what that would look like. So once again, we got our surveys, we got the fire drill, the counselors. Now what's going to happen is I am going to, the lesson, the unit is actually going to start on the 11th. So I'm going to just put a dot right there. So when it starts on the 11th and it's going to end on the 29th. So that is the time. I have 3 weeks to cover this. And the topic is going to be westward expansion, how America moved west. Now with this, I actually have a total of 6 sets of notes. So those are the first thing I'm plugging is my test. So over here we got the test. That's going to be in the very last day. And after students are done with the test, they're going to work on ed puzzles for the next unit. So that way they have something to do right away and gets them kicked off for the next unit. And so 3 weeks, starting 11th, ending the 29th, the last day is the test and ed puzzles starting off for the next unit. Now, the next thing I'll do is I'll plug in my notes. So those, I have 6 sets of notes. So I need 6 days to do those notes. Now, sometimes the notes may take a little bit longer or then, give more time for it, but we're just gonna make it real easy. 6 sets of notes. So I'll normally, and I like, if possible, I like to space them out, but once again, it really all depends what the calendar looks like. And so I'll put the notes here. So the notes we're gonna do first be notes here, notes here. We're gonna do notes here. Now I would normally do notes here, right? Kind of space a little bit, but I can't obviously because counselors are gonna be here this day. And then I'm gonna do notes on this day. Actually, I'm gonna do notes over here and notes right here. All right, and I'll explain why I kind of did different dates on those ones here. But if possible, I space them out just because it's nice to have a little bit of break in between when you're doing the notes. So it's not the same exact thing, one day right after the other. So I got those notes. Now let me just kind of put down what the notes are, just for our sake here. Once again, this is something I already taught. This is something we already did, but I just wanted to see you to see how I actually planned for it all. And so the first set of notes here are notes on manifest destiny. I'll just put manifest. This was notes on the trails west. So that's the second set of notes. The next set of notes is the Texas Revolution. I'll just put down Texas. The next set was the Mexican-American War. Let's put it Mexican War. The next set of notes was on the Mexican Cession, so I'll just put down treaty. Good enough for me for right now. And the last set of it was on California, the California Gold Rush and all of that. All right, California gold. So now you got your lessons. So once again, whatever you're to come up with your own system of plug and play, things we do over and over. But if you can find out that lessons that you do every other time, I'll give you an example. I had a mentee that was doing geography, and same thing. I thought, what are some plug and play things you can do? And so we said maybe each unit is going to be a different region. And then within each unit, you kind of do the same thing. Maybe a map to start off with, and then maybe do certain notes about the countries, comparing them, and or something like that. So, but if you can find something that you can repeat, rinse and repeat, right? The cycle, it's going to make your life so much easier. So the next thing I would do, plug and play. I got my test, got the notes, are my ed puzzles. So I usually like to do my ed puzzles before the material. So in this case, they already got a little bit of ed puzzles because the last unit we did was on the 8th, was when we finished the last one. So they did really one set of ed puzzles. And so what I might have them do is just continue the ed puzzles on this day. All right, so continue ed puzzles on this day. All right, so they continue ed puzzles. So by watching ed puzzles from the previous test and unit and this one here, they should have a lot of the information that we're really going to be covering in the notes. And then I might do one more ed puzzle down here, and then that will take care of it. So from this ed puzzle pretty much will cover most of this material here, and this will finish up the material. So once again, the students are getting the same information different ways, but they're getting the same information. Now, here's the other part. Now this is where you have the activities. And this is where you get, at least in my mind, you can venture out, try new things, and everything else. Like one thing I'm trying, which is brand new, but we're going to try this, is an escape room. I call it a breakout EDU. It's called breakout EDU. And so I'm going to do this room right here. That's a totally brand new activity that I'm going to do, is an escape room. Sometimes what I'd like to do is before the actual test, I like to do review, and so I'll play Book It. So we'll put that right there, Book It is the actual review, right? So now I got those two things down. So I got a Book It in there, I got an escape room in there, and whatever activities you can come up with, you would fill in the blank. So that's what we're looking at so far. And then on this day, we're learning about the Trails West. On the 15th, I'm gonna have them play the Oregon Trail, right? So that's an activity to kind of reinforce what we learned about. So we got Oregon Trail can be reinforced there. We got the escape room, which kind of has to do with the entire Manifest Destiny. Then we got to Book It to reinforce everything else. And now we have the 22nd. That's the only space that we have left. And so if you think of another activity, you can put it in there. In my case, what I was going to do that day was a study guide that kind of reinforces that. That's one possibility I had. Another possibility was another Book It right here that I can use to reinforce it, the idea of that as well. Or another activity. In this case, what we'll do is we'll do like a map activity. And the map activity, the purpose of that is to show the trails going west, as well as to show the next succession, everything coming up, everything that we just learned about, to show how America expanded its territory. And so that is how you use the plug and play system. Develop some lessons that you do over and over again, different material, but if you have that, it's going to make your life so much easier because you're not recreating the wheel every single time. Another thing you might want to have in mind as you're creating your lessons, this is not a necessity, it's not at all, but you might want to have this in mind as you're going through, because if that question comes up, why are we learning about this? You want to be able to connect it to that bigger philosophy you have, if you have that down already, but then you can also break down a philosophy a little bit more. Give you an example. In this unit coming up, which we're going to want to lay out for you in 1 second here, we're going to be watching a video called The Slave Narratives. The Slave Narratives. It is a video that was created. So what happened is they interviewed former slaves, and then later on HBO took those interviews and they had famous actors and actresses read those interviews. And so it gives you a kind of a first-hand account of what slavery was actually like. And so what I'm going to be telling the students is what I want you to get from this. Now, you don't actually have to voice this to the students, but if you do, that's even better. But if not, no worries. But if you know it at least, then you can guide your lessons towards that ultimate goal, what you want them to get from it. So I told my students the reason we're watching a video is 4 reasons. One is because I want you just to have understanding what slavery was in general. The second thing is I want you to understand just how horrific slavery really was. The third thing I want you to get from this is just an appreciation for our lives, that no matter what we're going through, it's nowhere close to what slaves had to endure. And the fourth thing I want you to get from the video is just how incredible these slaves were, that even though they had to endure all of those things, they were still able to find the joy and happiness. They were still able to continue moving forward in life and find the joy and happiness in little things that go on, which in turn gives me hope in trying to find joy and happiness when I have struggles. So those 4 things. So the video is about slavery, but I'm hoping students make those personal connections with that, which then ties into my overall big philosophy of what I want students to get out of this class. So that's kind of how you went through. Once again, if that's not something you're comfortable with that, or are you able to dive into that, that's no problem at all. But eventually you want to get to that point where within each lesson you can know exactly why you're teaching a lesson. Now, to be honest with you, if the answer is, hey, I just want them to have this information so we go on to the next thing, that's okay as well. That's definitely okay as well. Just have an understanding why you're having each lesson helps you as you through this overall process of creating lessons. Up next is grading. So part of lesson planning, a lot of times what happens is this, especially for new teachers. We spend we start off really good. We started off good, we have high hopes, and we're gonna do all these things, and then the day comes and we start implementing our lessons. The next thing you know, you're dealing with classroom problems, and the lesson you have is taking longer than you thought it would, and then next thing you know, you have to change your lesson, but then finally you get done with the lesson, and you have to do the grading, but yet you still have the lesson plan for the next thing, and before you know it, there's this snowball effect of lesson planning, behavior, grading, meetings, and you quickly find yourself getting overwhelmed because there's just so much on your plate. So if you can create a system where you can streamline grading, what you're gonna find out is it's gonna help you not only with lesson planning, not only carrying out lessons, not only with classroom management, but it's gonna help you keep your sanity as well. Because a lot of times what happens is teachers get bogged down with the grading and they lose that energy doing that, and which takes away from the energy of actually carrying out great lessons. So create a system for grading. So here's what I do for grading. So the moment you create a lesson, and once again, we're gonna go dive deeper into this. When you create a lesson, you should have an idea of how you're going to grade that lesson. For me, here's what I've created. In my mind, each class period, a student can earn roughly about 20 points. So however that period is broken up, whatever assignments we do, overall those points should equal about 20 points. You don't have to choose that number. That's not the important thing. But what's important is that whatever number you do choose, you have to be consistent with it, meaning that it's going to be roughly the same amount of points a student can earn each day. Because when it comes time to put stuff in the grade book, it's not going to be skewed one way or the other. There's not going to be one assignment that's going to break a student's grade, you know? And so even if there's a big assignment, like a 2-week assignment, you probably want to break that up into smaller chunks and grade each thing individually. Otherwise, at the very end, got one assignment, kid doesn't turn in, boom, there you go. They can't recover, the grade just can't recover. So just think about 20, I'm gonna use 20 points. Once again, that number is not set in stone, it's whatever you want. But for me, about 20 points a day is what a student can earn. So the next part of that is, all right, so what are students gonna be doing? How am I going to collect it? When am I going to collect it? How am I going to grade it? When am I going to grade it? And how am I getting it back to students? So let's go through that one more time. The things you want to keep in mind is when it comes to grading is how you're going to grade something, how many points is it going to be worth, how you're going to collect it, how you're going to pass it back, when you're going to grade it, all those things, those little small pieces. If you can create a system that covers those small little individual pieces, trust me, it's going to make your life easier. So for this assignment, so think about this here now. Each piece of paper that comes in, I want to grade. All right, each piece of paper comes in, I want to grade. Can I collect something once every 3 days, once every 2 days? Do I have to collect it every day? And if I am collecting something every day, how am I going to grade that every day? And can I keep up that pace? So create some sort of system. So let me explain the system I have in my class on how I do grading. So here we go. 20 points a day. All right, we got that, 20 points a day. If we do notes, what I have students do is, let's say it's a one-day notes. And so students do the notes that day. There might be multiple things we're doing that period. Maybe notes starts with a warm-up, and then maybe we're watching a video where they have to answer some questions. Maybe there's some notes that I give them. Maybe there's a smaller reflection. But bottom line, it's all on one piece of paper. I call that all one note. And so they're taking notes that day. One piece of paper, one activity. And then however, whatever we're doing, I will keep in mind that, it should be roughly around 20 points. And so for me, what's worked very well as far as my pace and everything goes is that I give them about 1 to 2 points for each note they take. So if they take 10 notes that day, there's their 20 points, something of that sort. Those numbers, once again, you can play with to find out what works good for you. And so, but the key is that it all goes on one paper. Then what happens at the end of the period, I'll have students count their own points. Now this is key here. Students count their own points. There's beauty behind this. One thing is when students count their own points, what I have at the end of my notes, it tells them what grade they earned. So if, for example, if it says 18 or above, you earned an A. 16, 17 a B, in 14 and 15 a C, and so forth. Why that is so important, it gives students that immediate feedback. It gives them the immediate feedback right away. At the end of the period, they know what grade they earned for that period. So that is wonderful, gives a feedback. Plus the other part is this: if they're counting their points, I don't have to, right? If they're counting points, and if I wanted to, I can just take whatever points they are and put it into the grade book. Now, at first I was always concerned, oh, weapon, they're cheating, or they're but I'm telling you, it's amazing. Out of 150 students, more often than not, I would say 95% of them do it right, do it honestly, and no problem at all. And so if they're counting the points, how much time does that save you where you don't have to do that? It saves you hours. It saves you hours, right? And so that's one thing I do. And I even took this grading to the next level. I mean, here's what I do. And this is how, I'm telling you, when I started doing this, I felt a huge weight off my shoulders. It kind of goes with this idea. If you are lesson planning, I mean, if you're really on top of the lesson planning and you're on top of everything else, back to the original statement in this video, you're going to find yourself with more time than you thought ever was possible. Even if you're yourself feeling so overwhelmed right now, you make some changes, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like a nice little hack, right? A teaching hack here, we're going to call it. So what I do is this, is I print out my roster. So I have 5 classes, so I have, every day I print out like 5 little roster sheets that have the student's name on it. And it goes this way. Let's say we do notes, students turn in notes. Students know exactly what they got. Wonderful, they counted their own points, excellent. I will take those notes and then I will give that to a student next period. So let's say first period notes, I'll give those notes to one of my students second period. And then what I'll tell them to do second period, the student that has the notes, I say, hey, and this is what I always tell them, do you want to take notes today or would you like to help me for a few extra credit points? And 99% of the time they're like, yeah, I want to help to get me out of notes and get some extra credit points. And so they'll usually volunteer to help. Now, I usually only ask my A students that I know that aren't going to suffer if they don't get that discussion for the day, right? So I choose students I know I can depend upon, but also students that I know are smart enough and that their grade's not going to suffer. And so second period comes, that student, I will first have them pass back papers. And you'll see how this all goes into a circular thing. They'll pass back papers, all right? So they're passing back papers. That's the first thing they do. And then they grade first period's notes. And that usually takes about an entire period. And grading is so easy because all they're doing is counting points. Now, I do want to clarify, that's another thing you want to think about is what are you going to grade and why are you grading? If you're grading for certain skills, you couldn't apply that for this because you want to look for certain skills and you want to know exactly where each kid's level is at. But if you're grading for completion, grading to make sure students did their work, then this is when this works so perfectly. So second period, student comes and they pass back papers for their period, and then they go ahead and grade first period's paper. And I just give them a copy of the notes. So they're all set. And then second period comes, they all turn in, they all count their own points and they all turn it in. And then I give that set of paperwork to a student in my third period. And then happens again, and then fourth period and fifth period. And then what happens is fifth period's work, if we're doing, let's say, whatever fifth period comes, and they turn everything in, then what I'll do is I'll take that stack and I'll give it to my first period the following day, a student first period, and they do the same thing. So within one day, I have everything graded and passed back. And I did absolutely nothing. Nothing. The students are doing all the work. If you can have students do things for you that you don't have to do, how much time does that give you? And this has been a game changer. This has been a game changer. And so I literally, with 1 or 2 days, I have all my grading caught up. And it just kind of keeps that flow going that way. Now, once again, if you're grading for certain skills, different story. Tests, different story, right? But on a day-to-day basis, that is how the grading is done in my classroom. And so that just gives me so much more time and energy to focus towards other things. The other thing you want to put in play is that what happens if a student is absent? So if a student's absent, first of all, how are they going to get the material? And then how are they going to make up the work or the points? For me, once again, each class period is worth 20 points. So if a student is absent, that means they lost those 20 points. How are they going to make that up? So that's something you want to think about or have put in place, because if you don't, what will happen the next day? Students are going to ask you, hey, I was absent, what do we do? And you're like, okay, hold on, let me figure that out. Let me get something for you. And it's going to throw off your whole flow. It's going to put another stress upon you and everything else. So you want to create some sort of system that will take care of a student's ever absent. So some things I've heard about, and I tried a little bit here and there, was like a buddy system, where they might ask somebody in their class what they learned about and get the work for them or something else. For me, that never worked out that well, just because buddy wasn't there, buddy wasn't dependable. How are they going to get the buddy? That just didn't work out too well for me. The other thing is, okay, well, so if that's not going to work, how are they going to know what we did? And so I created a calendar, and on the back of my board is a calendar, and I'll show you that here shortly. And the calendar tells you what we're doing that week. And so the calendar then gives them an idea of what we're learning about. So that way, if they are absent and they want to know what we learned about, what we did, they can look at the calendar to get the idea. But to actually make up the points, that's a different story. So what I always have extra credit. I have that for numerous reasons, but I have extra credit. And the ironic thing about extra credit is the only students that do extra credit are the students that don't need extra credit normally, but it's there nonetheless. But what happens, and this is taught at the beginning of the year, I tell students, if you're ever absent, you're going to come in the next day, you're going to look on the calendar to see what we learned about. Then you're going to complete an extra credit assignment. That extra credit assignment is going to replace the points that you missed from the previous lesson. So that way, it puts the burden on them to come up with the work, or it means I don't have to come up with something for them to do. It's already set there in stone. It's already there. It's always available to them. They know exactly what to do. They're gone 1, 2, 3 days. I have 1, 2, 3 extra credit. Plenty for them to do and make up the points. Now the other part of it, that extra credit goes along with what exactly we're learning about. So for example, let's say I'm on chapter 12. Well, first of all, here's my extra credit. My extra credit is at the end of each, so I have a chapter, and the chapter has different sections. At the end of each section are some questions that students would answer. So they would ideally read that section, and then they would answer the questions at the bottom. Read and answer, read and answer. And so my extra credit is they're to read that section and write and answer the questions at the bottom of it, and then turn that into me. So if lesson 12 is about comparing the North and the South, right? Then the extra credit they're doing ties right in with what we're learning about. And then when we go into a new unit, I create new extra credit. So by doing that, it always gives us a chance for students to make up work they've missed, and it reinforces what we're learning about, and it takes the burden off my shoulders of having to come up with something, and puts it upon the student's shoulders to actually choose to do the work or not to do the work. But you want to create something there, some sort of net there, put something in place and plan for, once again, it's all about planning, what you're going to do if a student is ever absent. All right, so let's show you how we're going to plan out exactly our next unit. Our next unit is focused on slavery. I'm teach history leading up to the Civil War. A big part of that Civil War is slavery, and so I want students to really understand about slavery. I'm going to spend 2 weeks, this is my unit right here, 2 weeks on the topic of slavery. So let's start with this. Once again, let's start with blocking out certain items. So once again, we're not going to have this, I'm not going to have that. Now also for us, we're off April 1st, April Fool's Day, not a joke. I guess that was a bad joke, wasn't it? And they were also off on the 15th, so no students that day. Plus our week off in April, spring break, and so this is gone. So in essence, I only have 8 days to cover the topic of slavery. 8 days to cover the topic of slavery. All right. Now, what I normally do is a plug-and-play system. Once we talked about that in previous ones, I'll put in my test, then I'll put in my notes, and then I'll put in ed puzzles and everything else. But since this is such a short week, I only have 8 days compared to a full 2 weeks or full 3 weeks, I'm going to change a few things. I'm not going to quite use the plug and play system exactly because I don't have as much time as I normally would. And so one thing, for example, is the 19th. If it's 2 weeks, I would start this day and I'm going to end this day. Normally on the 19th, I would have a test, but I decided that I'm not going to test for this topic. I mainly want students to understand the topic, and so for this case, I'm going to forego the test so that way I can have another assignment instead. So that's the first thing. Next thing is, the main thing I'm going to focus on, the main way I teach about slavery is I show them a video called the Slave Narratives. And so that's going to take 3 days. And so we're going to do that, and I'm going to put this right here. I'm going to put down, I'll put down Slave Narratives. Let's put down the video. How's that? So I should slave narratives. All right. So that takes 3 days. Then I also have notes. Have notes for 3 days. Now that becomes a thing because I could put it here starting the 5th, but then there's that whole week off. And normally I don't like to split units up because there's a break in there, if from one week to the other. So normally if I'm doing units, I like to have them all the same time and I like the break to be between units, but time frame just didn't allow it for this time. So the best thing I can do in this situation is I don't want to start notes here because I don't want to break that up because I guarantee the kids are going to lose their notes from here to here. So I'm going to start notes on the 16th. And now I got it's one set of notes, but it's going to take 3 days. And it's called Opposition to Slavery. So I'm going to just put down OPP notes, Opposition to Slavery. It's about how, the different ways in which people oppose slavery. So in there I talk about Nat Turner, Frederick Douglass, Underground Railroad and everything. So that takes 3 days. Now what I have left are just 2 days. Once again, not doing a test here. So what am I going to do? Originally, I was going to do this. Originally, I was going to do look at the last day, kind of like a review of everything they learned. I was going to look at this day. And then over here, I was going to do something. It's called Green Sally Up. It's a poem that later on is made into a song and everything else. And we analyzed the poem, which is basically a slave poem. It's actually a really fun activity. And so I was going to do that one here. And then I was going to do look at here. But what I just found out is that actually this day here, they're not allowing students to bring the backpacks because it's the day before the break and the word, they might do something they shouldn't be doing. So students will not have the backpacks this day, which messes up my plans because they don't have any paper, pencil, nothing like that. So I'm going to flip it around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do look at this day. And then on this day here, we're going to do the poem. And then that's my 2-week time frame. So that is my next unit that I'm going to cover. And so you see, once again, all at once, boom, I plan out for the next 2 to 3 weeks. It's done, 10 minutes or less, and I'm ready to go. Now, what we're going to do next is we're actually going to dive into these days right here. So I want you to see. So that's the big time frame, right? And so what I'm doing, I'm going to record the next 3 days of the slave narrative videos. So I want you to see, okay, that's what we put down, but how is each day really spent? We know that's a topic, that's what we're going to learn about. We're never going to watch a video, that's the main thing. But the problem is, what a lot of times teachers fall into, is that, okay, well, how do I fill up 50 minutes each period? Because my video is not that long. And that is what I'm going to show you next. So now that we know what we're specifically doing for the next 2 weeks, let's specifically look at this 3-day lesson, which is going to be the slave narratives, the video. I want to break down those 3 days and show you how to plan for each one of those days. All right. So we got the 2-week unit plan. We're talking about slavery in the South, and then we're going to specifically look at those 3 days regarding watching that video called the slave narratives. So the first thing you want to think about is how you're going to start out your class. Bell ringer is the name for it. I call it my warm-up. But you want to have something for students to do the moment they walk into the class. Now for me, just like I have plug and plays with my overall weekly, lesson planning as far as the notes and ed puzzles and tests. I also have plug and plays with my warm-ups. At the beginning of the year, we've spent, you may think I'm making this up, but we spent about a week going through our warm-ups. So we are just practicing our warm-ups. And that's for like an entire week. So students have this, it's second nature, because the best way to create structure in your classroom is to start that from the very beginning of the school year and the very beginning of each class period. And so the purpose of the warm-ups, one is, first, probably for me, the most important thing is I need students to be able to work on something independently. The key word here is independently, so I can take care of my housekeeping, which is doing attendance, which might be passing out papers, which might be trying to find that student to volunteer to help me grade, which might be taking care of any kind of request, like a Band-Aid or go see the nurse or something. So I need that time period at the beginning to make sure that's taken care of. For me, I found out that I need at least 4 minutes, but usually it's more or less around 6 or 8 minutes for that warm-up. And so that's the first thing that you want to make sure you have in place. So my plug and play for my warm-ups, I have terms and names, which are definitions. I have, what else? A geography reasoning, which is a map, and so you have to write and answer questions about that. And then I have my timeline, where there's a timeline, students have to write and answer questions about the timeline. Those are my things I go back to time and time and time again. Now, it doesn't always have to be that, but if students know that there's a warm-up and they kind of understand the format of it, you can kind of put other things in there. In fact, that's what we're going to do with these slave narratives. I'm actually going to have a different kind of warm-up for these three, so it's a little different than my normal thing, but you see the process is going to be the same. What that process is, as soon as the students walk into class, in fact, I actually have this timer, and you'll see it here in a little later. The timer is going the moment the bell rings. So even before the bell rings, I have the timer going. And the students will come in, the timer's already going. They'll look on the board or on the TV screen, and they'll see exactly what they need to do. And then when that bell rings, then that is when I expect the students to be quiet, and I expect students to be working, be prepared, get stuff out. And so if I have 6 minutes, I can do my attendance. I can kind of monitor the room. I can make sure students are working. I can make sure students are on task, not talking, and all these other things. I can get the tone of the class where I want it to be at. Because once I get that tone of where I want the class to be at, then I can carry that all the way through. But if you have students come in and there's no set routine of what they're doing and they're asking you questions, I don't understand how to do this, or what we got to do, or what are we doing today, or it throws chaos into your classroom. So you want to develop a good routine, a good warm-up for the students the moment they walk in. So we want to put that into our daily lesson. So that's going to be, we're going to plan 3 days out. That's going to be part of each of the 3 days. And then the other part of the lesson we're doing is the video itself. And so the video itself, it's going to have questions to go along with it. Anytime you show a video, please have questions. Back to the idea, idle hands are the devil's playground. If students are working on something as they're watching the video, you're going to find you're going to lose a lot of them, but worse than that, you're going to maybe lose some of that behavior. And so there'll be questions students are going to be answering as the video is playing. Now, the purpose of these questions for me, twofold, maybe threefold, I guess. One is for them to get the information. I want them to understand. I want them, to learn about slavery. The other thing, the purpose of these video questions is to keep them busy. And the third thing is we're going to use these questions as springboards to having a classroom discussion. So that is the purpose I have these videos, or the purpose for these questions for these videos. And then the final thing is you want to make sure you know how to end the class period. For me, I end with giving the students no more than 2 minutes to pack up. So there's some other things I got to do. Maybe they have to grade some papers, or they got to do something else, or we're having a discussion. That's all fine. But I usually give students no more than 2 minutes to pack up. If it's 5 minutes and you're like, all right, go ahead and pack it up, it takes a minute for students to put stuff in their backpack, if that. So that means you're asking for trouble. That means you're asking for 4 minutes students to be disruptive, to cause some sort of problems, you know. So I keep very good track of my time. You're going to see a couple things. One is I'm always have this timer going. I always have this timer in front of the room. That's usually for my warm-up to get kids focused and everything else. But then I always have my watch. I always have my timer going on my watch. And I set it for different things. I might set it for how long we're going to watch the video for. I might set it for how long before the class is up. Whatever I need it for, I have this timer going as well. So I have the big timer front for students to see, so they know exactly how long they have to work on a particular activity. But I also have my timer going all the time. Now I know this may be kind of neurotic, and I'm sure there's many people out there that think that's too much. It might be too much for many people. But if you can have something like that to kind of keep you on track, it's going to make things so much easier. And so don't give students more than 2 minutes to kind of pack things up at the end. And that's kind of how you want to end the class. And then on the last day, on day 3, that's when I'm going to collect all the work. So I'll give them a little bit more time at the end there, and you'll see how that plays out as well. All right. So we got everything figured out what we are doing. We know exactly what we need to have for the students. And so the only thing for the next 3 days that we have to give to the students is a copy of those video questions. Now, that's the only thing. So when it comes time to make copies, first of all, never make copies the day of, you need something. Because I promise you, that copy machine is going to be broken down. There's going to be a line out the door. It's going to be stressful. Once again, we're trying to plan a unit at a time. And so you definitely want to have the copies. Probably, once again, probably the week before I'm actually going to do something, I'll have all the copies made. That way it's not stressful. Not at the last moment, I'm not frantically trying to figure out how to make all these copies. And so doing some quick math here, we have 5 classes, about 30 kids in each class. That's about 150 copies that I need. I always make a little extra. I always make about 20% more. So in my case, instead of 150, I'll make 180 copies. The reason I make those extra 30 copies is because there'll be days where a student will lose their paperwork, and they'll lose, they'll lose it, or whatever the reason is, threw it out, who knows, but they're going to need another copy. And so if I just make exactly what they need, if the next day comes and said, oh, I don't have it, do you have some more? And I go, no, then I'm panicking again. So I always make about 20% more than what I need. That covers those kids that somehow forgot to bring theirs or lost theirs or something else of that sort. Plus, worst case scenario, if I have some left over, I just use it for next year. So making copies, being prepared, having the work ready to go, that's the next thing you want to do. So here's what we've done so far. We looked at the entire year. We paced out the entire year, trying to figure out, okay, how much time do I have for each unit? Each unit about 2 to 3 weeks, right? And so we figured, oh, okay, we got that part down. Now, what we do is we're looking at our unit, all right? So our unit, this particular unit, we're spending 2 weeks on, right? 2 weeks on learning about slavery, spending 2 weeks on this unit. Okay, got that. So anyway, as you saw, we did on the calendar, we planned it out. Now we have these 3 days. So this is our lesson. A lesson could be 1 day, could be 2, 3, whatever you want it to be. That's a lesson. But a lesson should be like one comprehensive, one idea, one main thought should create a lesson. And so the focus of this lesson is learning about slavery. And the main thing we're going to do to learn about slavery is to watch a video called The Slave Narratives. So now we're going to plan each day out. Here is where a lot of new teachers get lost because, okay, I got the big concepts, I understand my pacing, I understand what I need to teach, but what do I do in that particular period? In that little block of time I have to teach, how do I fill that time up? And so let me show you what I do to do this. Now I normally do this on a piece of paper, and sometimes in my mind I could just do mine depending on what we're doing. But I'm gonna put up here on the whiteboard, so that way you see exactly my thought process and what I go through. So let's do this here. So we got 3 days. We got day 1, day 2, and day 3 to lesson. So let me kind of write up here. First of all, I always tell this to my students: please forgive my writing. I have some horrible penmanship, but let's get to it. Here we go. So day 1, we'll put down day 1, day 2. And day 3. All right, so now we got our 3 days. Now, day 1, day 2, and day 3. Now, for me, each of my periods is 50 minutes. So we're gonna just kind of put 50 up here. Each one is 50 minutes. That is how much time frame I have to work, how much time I have to fill, how much time I have to work to teach, is that little 50-minute time frame. So when I'm creating my daily lesson, I'm thinking to myself, okay, what am I gonna do? And here's the key, every single moment. You want to teach from bell to bell, bell to bell. And so that is a thought process. Now, normally my lessons are broken up this way, a daily lesson. I have my beginning, my introduction. I call it my warm-up, what students do when they first come into class. And then we have the lesson itself, or the activity, the lesson, the notes, whatever else it is. That's the second chunk. And the last thing is basically ending the period, wrapping things up. It's kind of like an essay, right? You got introduction, your body, and then your conclusions. It's the same thing. And so the first thing I do is just figure out the time frame of everything. So let me show you the time frame of everything. Day 1, here we go. Day 1, students are gonna come in, and once again, I have them trained on this. Now, normally I have some regular warm-ups that I do. I normally have my geographical reasoning, my terms and names, my chronological thinking, timeline stuff. But for this activity, I am changed up a little bit, right? Because we're actually watching the video, so it's a little different process. But what I want you to pay attention to is that format is exactly the same. Exactly the same. So when students walk in, 99% of the time, they will see the screen that looks like this. It says, take out a blank piece of paper and title it. It tells them what to title the paper, all right? So it tells you, all right, take it out, title this. And then it tells you, write down the essential question. In this case, there is no essential question, all right? The next part is, it tells them what to do. So if this was geographical reasoning, it would say, write and answer the questions on page 7, whatever it is, 200 something. So, but this tells them what they need to do. It tells them write down these questions on the left-hand side. So the way I do my notes and everything else is kind of Cornell note style, left side, right side. So it tells them what to do. The key for your warm-up is you got to train your students on these warm-ups, because if they're trained on it, then you have that time period. Once you have that time period for you to take care of all the housekeeping and what you need to take care of. So students will come in and they'll basically got 5 questions they have to copy down, and they got to title the paper and get the paper out. And so I usually give them about 1 minute per question, plus 1 minute to get the paper out, plus 1 minute to title it. So that's 7 minutes. So warm up, here we go. Day 1, our warm up is 7 minutes. Got it. All right, boom, that's down. All right, and so that is that part of it. Let's go into day 2. Day 2, it tells them take out the previous paper, and we're going to add to it. So you could technically collect day 1 warm up, but then you have to grade it. And so what I do is, since it's a lesson, I combine it all together. It's a 3-day lesson, so I have them hold on to the same paper for 3 days. That way, instead of grading 3 papers for the warm-ups per student, I'm only grading 1. It cuts down the paperwork, cuts down the grading, streamlines the whole entire process. So it tells them, take out the same paper again you had yesterday. If you weren't here, this is what you got to do. And it tells them what they got to do. I do not say a word for the instructions. Students come in, I do not tell them what to do. Students go, what are we doing? I point to the screen. And then my job is take care of the housekeeping and monitor the class. If you put the time in training your students in this, it makes your whole entire year so much easier. So continuing here, it says this now. It says copy down the 5 questions on the left-hand side and answer them on the right-hand side. Okay. Now this one actually, I have to change it. I'd want to give them 10 minutes for this one, 1 minute for each question, 1 minute for each answer. All right. So I'd actually have to change this time. So this time would be 10 minutes and plus 1 minute for taking the paper out. So it'd be 11 minutes. So this one would be 11 minutes. We'll put that over here on day 2. That's 11 minutes. Okay, so that's the warm-up. And then let's look at day 3. Day 3 here. You notice the same format over and over again, right? I'm telling you, this repetition, it makes your life so much easier. You're not recreating the wheel. That's no surprises to the students. They love the stability. No matter what they say, trust me, they love the stability. So here we go. This one, what was the most surprising thing you learned about the video so far? 1 minute per question, 1 minute per answer, and then 1 minute take out the paper. That's 3 minutes. So we'll put that over here. All right, so that's what we got so far. Now, let's look at the end of class. The end of class. I'm gonna put down end over here. All right, so we got end over there. Students do not need more than 2 minutes to wrap things up. They do not need more than 2 minutes to put away their stuff. If you give them more than 2 minutes, if they give them 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes, you're gonna find yourself running into sometimes some classroom management problems. So you, once again, that bell to bell, idle hands are the devil's playground. And so for finishing up the class, I only give them 2 minutes. So for day 1, 2 minutes, and day 2, 2 minutes. Now day 3, let me show you here. This would be on day 3. Day 3, they are actually counting their points. They are counting how many points they earn. Once again, the beauty of this is before they leave, they know exactly what grade they got. It holds them accountable. It gives them feedback right away. And because they are counting their points, it makes grading on you so much easier. Once again, this is something we've done from the beginning of the year. We train this, and students know how to do this. This is mainly just the directions as a reminder one last time. But for counting points, I mainly just give them 3 minutes. 3 minutes to count up all their points, make sure the name's on it, everything else. So for the third and final day, we got 2 minutes at the end to kind of wrap things up, put stuff away, and then 3 minutes to count their points. So that would leave them, or that would equal about 5 minutes. All right, so now, here we go, back to day 1. Day 1 in. Students come in, 7 minutes, they're working on the warm-up. I know at the end, they got 2 minutes to wrap things up. I have a 50-minute class, so that means I have a total of 41 minutes of the lesson. 41 minutes of the lesson. All right, next thing is the video itself. Let's put this in here, the video itself. So I'm gonna put down the video. The video itself is, 72 minutes long. The video itself is 72 minutes long. That means if I have that 72 minutes and I broke it up into 3 days, that means the video would be 24 minutes per day. So the video would be 24 minutes per day, right? 24 times 3, 72. I show the entire video in that 3-day period. So for the video, I'm gonna put down 24 minutes. And there we go. So you see our time's being filled up. All right, time's being filled up. The last part it is, part of the reason I'm doing this, the whole entire video, is I want them to, I tell this to my students, and this is kind of the purpose, once again, thinking about what the purpose is of your lesson. 4 things I want students to get out of this lesson. Once again, is just understand what slavery is, understand how horrible slavery was, how horrific it was. Hopefully they walk away with a little bit of appreciation for the blessings that we have. And the 4th thing is just to see how the slaves, as well as us in general, how remarkable we are that we can go through something so tragic and still, come out of it victorious. And so that's the 4 things I want them to get away with it. So to get to that point, to touch upon those things, there has to be a classroom discussion. I want to talk with the students and get questions back and forth and all that. And so the rest of the time, I'm going to fill up with a discussion. So let me just kind of put down here discussion. All right. And each day is going to be a little different, how much time I have for the discussion. So let me do some math real fast here. So we got 31, 32, 33. That's 17 minutes discussion here. All right. Let's kind of do the math over here. Once again, I got 35, 36, 37. That is 37. That's 13 minutes discussion here. And then over here, I got 8 plus 4 is 32. 18 minutes discussion. So this is what we're looking at, all right? So this is the kind of like the daily process, the day-to-day, how each minute is going to be used. So if you hear the term bell to bell, this is what you should be thinking. If you find yourself having a hard time filling up a class period with a lesson, this is how you do it. And this is how I do it. I start with a warm-up, how long does that take? I know how long it takes to the end. Then I figure out what I'm doing in the middle. And so that, for me, is the best way of doing it. Now, the thing is this. When I have discussion, I always have the intro, the warm-up, always have the conclusion, but I could put the discussion before the video, or I could put the discussion after the video. I could put the 12 minutes of the video and then a little bit of discussion. How you break this up is up to you. Well, how you do the video and the discussion part. But the key is you want to make sure you're consistent with those times. All right? And so for me, for example, day one, they're going to come in, you're going to do the warm-up, and then what I'm going to do is we're actually going to, so here's the questions. This actually is connected with another video I'm going to play. It's a brain pop video. So these questions are connected with a brain pop video I'm going to play about slavery. That video is 5 minutes. So that video is 5 minutes. So for day one, part of my time is going to be eaten up by watching this brain pop video right here that goes along with the question. So as the video is playing, the students are going to answer the questions. The video is 5 minutes. So let's kind of work our magic here real fast. So 5 minutes, so I'll put down BP for brain pop. The video is 5 minutes, and that would reduce our time down here to 12 minutes of discussion. All right? And so that's what we're looking at. And so now things are revised a little bit. Now, I know for some people this may be too analytical, too constraining, but I am promising you, if you get even somewhat close to this, your lesson planning is going to go so much smoother. Your days are going to go so much smoother. For me to keep track of all this, I usually have it written down somewhere so I know exactly when to pause the video and everything else. I have a timer for students when they first walk in, and I even have a timer on my watch. And so I always have this going as a way of reminding me to move on to the next thing. So when it comes time to break down the actual individual day, this is how you'd want to do it. Now for the discussions, now that's a little bit of the soft skills there, right? That's the interaction you have with your classes. Some classes I could go on for all day talking to students back and forth. Some students are like pulling teeth. So that's going to vary a little bit, but you know the time frame you need to cover. And if for some reason that discussions go over this day, and then maybe I don't have them this day here, so you can play with a little bit as each day comes along. I hope that makes sense. Let's keep going on this whole process of lesson planning. But now it's finally on to showtime. Let's see how all our hard work pays off, and actually see how it goes in the classroom. Now, regarding the video coming up here, you're gonna, I of course can't show you my students' faces or even their names, and so there'll be different parts of the video that I'm gonna speed up, and the angle might be a little different just to avoid any kind of issues like that. But what I want you to get from the videos coming up is mainly to see how the warm-up plays out as well as the class discussions play out. I want to make sure you see those. So you see the interaction I have with my students and all the work that we put into place, how it actually comes to be in the classroom. Seven minutes, what you got? Everything you need is right there. Copy those 5 questions down on the left-hand side. And Heidi, I'll get those for you in 1 second, okay? All right, first thing is I want to make sure you know about this homework. You guys do not have homework this week. In fact, you guys have 29 points towards no homework. You may not have homework next week. It really depends how this week goes, but definitely no homework this week. Questions on that? Next thing, extra credit. We got a new extra credit pages over there. So if you're looking to bring your grade up, you can always do extra credit. The pages you can work on out of the book online is 147, 48, 49, and 150. If you don't know how to do it, the directions are right up here. You can just grab one of these that tells you how to do the extra credit. But those are the pages you want to work on. We only got about 8 weeks left of school. That's about, if I did my math right, about April, May, yeah, about 2 months, about 8 weeks left of school. Yeah. So it's not much time at all. So if you're looking to get your grade up, now's the time to do it. Otherwise, you're going to lose your opportunity. So extra credit is available. And the next thing is, we took the test last Friday. So first of all, if you were here last Friday and you took the test and you're not happy with the results, you can retake the test this Friday at lunchtime. So if you were here, you took it, but you're not happy, you can retake it this Friday at lunchtime. Now, if you were not here last Friday, couple things, two things. One is you can take the test this Friday at lunchtime. So this Friday at lunchtime is available for you to take the test the first time or to retake the test if you want to, Friday at lunchtime. But also, if you were not here last Friday, we collected the study guide. So if you were not here last Friday and you did the study guide, what you want to do is as you're leaving today, just make sure you put it in this in bin right here so I can grade it for you. So if you did the study guide, but you did not turn in because you were not here, put in the in bin and I'll make sure I grade it for you. Any questions about any of that at all? Let's get to it. Here we go. So here's what we got. We got a 3-day assignment. We're going to start today. We're going to finish it on Wednesday. Big picture, big picture. Man, for the entire year, we're trying to tell the story of the United States. All right, that's the whole idea behind the class, telling the story of the United States. We started with the 13, this is how we started at the beginning of the year. Give me a second. We started with the 13 colonies at the beginning of the year. And we're telling the story how those 13 colonies came to what we have today. 13 colonies fought a war. It's called the American Revolutionary War. Give me a second. And basically from there, it turned as the Revolutionary War. From there, it became United States. From there, it doubled in size with the Louisiana Purchase. And then it grew again with the Mexican-American War. And that's kind of where we left off. We're going to finish off this school year. We're going to finish off the school year talking about the Civil War. That's pretty much how we're going to end the class. The reason we fought this, first of all, the Civil War was a war America fought between itself, between the northern states that did not want slavery and the southern states that wanted slavery. And they fight each other, and that is the Civil War. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the events that led up to that Civil War. And the biggest thing we need to talk about is slavery, because that's what kind of caused everything. So for the next 3 days, we're going to talk about slavery. Now, first of all, there's a couple things I want you to take away from the next 3 days. The first one is this, we all kind of know what slavery is, but I really just want you to really understand just how awful that was. That's the first thing I want you to take away, just how awful slavery was. The second thing I want you to take away is just how lucky we are currently. I don't care what's going on in your life. I'm thinking about my life. I'm 50-something years old, and I think about all the things I had to go through in my life. And I can tell you right now, there's nothing in my life that I had to go through that compares to what slaves had to endure. So the fact that I was able to live the life I have so far, I'm quite thankful for. So I'm hoping you kind of walk away thankful for the wonderful things you have going on in your life currently. And the last thing I want you to walk away with is just understanding just how humans, how slaves are just so resilient. Resilient meaning that you can go through something and keep going forward. So I think about all the things that slaves had to endure, and yet they were still able to go forward every single day, keep living. and then how when they find slavery finally ended, how they're able to keep going in life. So just how resilient humans are and slaves are to go through something so horrible and still come out the other side. So those are the big takeaways I want you to get. But before we jump into the main video, we're going to show a quick little video on slavery in general. And so this is going to be a brain pop. What you're going to do, these are the 5 questions right here. You're going to answer them as the video is playing. So as the video is playing, you're going to answer these 5 questions on the right-hand side. So hopefully you wrote down those questions. So here we go, 5 questions. Let's get to it. So our focus is slavery on America. That's our focus, and that's where we'll be talking the next 3 days, slavery in America, what was it like to be a slave, and so forth. But as an introduction, we got this video, so let's kind of go through this real fast. Number 1, someone raise your hand. Name 3 places where slavery happened. Who would like some extra credit points, please? Yes, ma'am? Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So what I want you to understand is those are nowhere near America. They're like on the other side of the world. So here's what I want you to understand about slavery. We're talking about slavery in America, but America is not the only country that had slavery. In fact, the entire world has had slavery. You name it, Romans, Greeks, China, Japan, all these different cultures all around the world had slavery at one point in time. So it is not unique to United States. I want to make sure you understand that. Slavery is not unique to the United States. It's been around since the beginning of time. So that's the first thing I want you to understand about slavery. But there is something unique about slavery in America. So the story goes like this. Christopher Columbus comes to the Americas, discovers Americas, runs into the Americas, hits the Americas, and then one of the first things he does is he starts to enslave the Native Americans here in the Americas. So right then, boom, from the beginning, starts enslaving the Native Americans. As more Europeans come over to the Americas, they start to enslave the Native Americans. But the problem is the Native Americans start to die, diseases and so forth. And so now the Europeans are like, man, we need to find some more slaves. Somebody raise your hand. Where do Europeans find slaves to bring to the Americas? What continent are these slaves on? Go ahead, Kelly. Africa. So let's kind of put this map here for you, just so we're all on the same page. All right. They call it triangle trade, but here's what you have going on. It's people from Europe. What they do is they travel down here to Africa. They pick up slaves from Africa and they take them over here to the Americas. And then from there they go back this way again, and every step of the way they're kind of doing some buying, selling, and trading. But here's what's different about slavery in America. Historically speaking, slavery kind of worked this way. My tribe attacks your tribe. We win, we take back some prisoners, we make them slaves. My country attacks your country. We win, we take back some people, make them as slaves. My empire attacks your empire. We win, we take some people back as slaves. This is unique because what's going on is it's not necessarily a war, it's more or less a business, a huge business is what it is. And what's going on is you got people from one continent traveling to another continent to pick up slaves to take to another continent. So this whole thing involves 3 different continents. It's taking people from one land to another land they never ever seen before. And it's not necessarily about warfare, it's totally about business in a sense. And for me, it's just something, the magnitude of this is greater than everything seen before. It's just huge. It's just huge amount of people they bring over. And so they start bringing people over here to the Americas, and that becomes known as a triangle trade. This is the Middle Passage right there. And now we got slavery in the Americas. And specifically, United States of America had slavery from the very, very beginning. And the next thing it says, skip down here to question number 4. What was outlawed in America in 1808? What was outlawed in America in 1808? Y'all hear? There you go, bringing slaves from Africa. So America says, you know what? We're going to outlaw, we're no longer allowed to bring slaves from Africa here to the United States. But that is different than outlawing slavery altogether. They still had slavery. The only difference is you were allowed to bring in new slaves to America. So they still had slaves in America. But what that really encouraged then was that the slaves of America, guess what happened to their kids? They became slaves automatically, right? So even though slavery was no longer allowed to be people from another country to here be slaves, there's still slavery. And you know, if you're born into, if your parents are slaves, you are, or if even one parent's a slave, your chances are you are a slave. So it did not end because of that. And then finally, the war is fought in 1865. That's the Civil War is fought, and that eventually ends slavery. All right? So these are just kind of things. So the thing I want you to understand about America, once again, slavery's been around since the beginning. And then the 3 big takeaways I want you to get about slavery, once again, are this. Just know how awful it really was. That's the purpose for watching this video. Just to know, hopefully from it, you realize is how lucky we are not to have to endure something like that. And the last thing I want you to walk away with is just the understanding just how powerful the human spirit is, how resilient humans are, and slaves themselves. All right. So that warm-up we're going to add to it tomorrow. So kind of just put that to the side. Put the warm-up to the side. But what I want you to do, you should have a paper on your desk. Look at that paper. We're going to talk about the movie we're going to watch. So here we go. Let's put this up here. It's called Unchained Memories, Reading from the Slave Narratives. So what this video is, basically, I'll just tell you what it says right here. 1865, slavery ends, right? Just by the way, just because slavery ends doesn't necessarily mean that it's all easy for African Americans after that point. Still a long ways to go. But 1865, slavery ends. And then what happens in 1937, the American government goes, you know what we should do is we should interview all of these former slaves. So we get a first-hand account of what it was like to be a slave. And so they sent reporters out to interview these slaves. Now, by the way, they didn't do a recording, like a video recording. They didn't have all that fancy technology back then. So they basically asked them questions. They're writing it down. So in 1937, they interview all the slaves. Fast forward to 2002, and in 2002, HBO says, you know what we should do? Let's take all those writings, all those interviews, have some famous actors and actresses read those interviews. And then that's what we got. So now, what you're going to be watching the video, you're going to see famous actors and actresses read the video. They're not the former slaves, but they are reading the words of former slaves. So the words you hear are real life accounts of what happened in the lives of these slaves. I want you to understand that's not made up. It's real. This basically really what happened, what slavery was like, first-hand account from slaves themselves. All right? So here we go. Let's start off easy. Number 1, take 2 minutes, read this to yourself right here, and answer number 1. Give you about 2 minutes, and we'll see who can get the answer for us. Extra credit points. Let's see who would like those points here. Does anybody have the answer for number 1? Who would that be? How old are they going to be? Y'all here? Let's see how good you are at math, sir. That's 100% correct. 84 is the answer. 84. We won't do the math for you on this one, but just know the answer is 84. So that's about how old these people are when they interview them. Question number 2, a volunteer just to read question number 2. Please go ahead, Heidi. All right, so you're going to keep going back to question number 2 through the entire video. Because what's going to happen is it's going to basically put the name of the slave up there and where they're from. When you see that, write down that state right here. All right, and so you're going to keep going back to number 2. I think you're going to end up with like total like 13 different states when it's all said and done. So you'll keep going back to number 2 every time an interview pops up with the slaves. Questions before we begin? Let's get to this. Here we go then. Start with question number 3. Start with question number 3. Let's get into this. All right. Bring it all back tomorrow. Bring back the questions for the video. Bring back your warm-up tomorrow. Once again, if you have a study guide you need to turn in, just make sure you put it in the in bin before you leave. Pack it up right here in about 1 minute. Overall, it went pretty well today. Kind of just went like I thought it would as far as the lessons go. So I got 5 periods, and so I did the same lesson through all 5 periods. And I could feel myself going, towards periods 4 and 5, get just kind of tired. Maybe because just did the same thing over and over again, but also just because if you do it for 3 hours straight, it's hard not to get tired. And so a couple of things, reflections about today. Let me think here. One point in time, I was having students read I think it's like read question number 2. It's not up here right now, but read question number 2. And one student, and so normally what I do, and maybe you've seen this, I'll take volunteers, and then they'll raise their hand. I'll give them extra credit points, and they'll read or they'll answer a question. But if no one volunteers, then we of course have to choose somebody. And so then I'll ask somebody to choose a number. Then I look at my roster to see what number it is, and then that person will have to participate. Or a student might choose another student. Let's say student volunteers, student A volunteers, and then I'll ask them to pick a number or name, and they may choose somebody else, and whoever they choose, then they have to answer the next question. So that way I kind of get participation that way a little bit more, and it kind of breaks up the monotony just a little bit. And so one student chose another student, and that person did not want to read one of the questions. And so I had a couple different options at that point in time. Normally what I'll do is I'll just kind of go over here and I'll write their name over on detentions, and I'll tell that person to talk to me. So for example, today that person said, I don't want to read. I said, just a quick sentence, go ahead and just read it, please. Like, I don't want to read. I said, are you sure? They go, okay. And I said, all right, no problem, just see me after class. And I just put their name up there. You need to have something like that just to hold kids accountable, because if you don't have something like that, then you're going to get a lot more students volunteering to not participate. They're like, I'm not going to read, or refusing to read. But if you just create something simple like that, just so students see that they can't just quickly, easily opt out of something, that they have to be part of the class. So that's one thing that kind of came up today. Another thing that kind of came up today was as the video was playing, I remember there was a certain scene in the video I didn't want the students to see, or I wanted to skip over. It was like 20 seconds. And so I'm like, all right. What am I going to do? Because I want to make sure that I get to that scene. So as the students are watching the video, it's like 17 minutes. So the overall the video is like an hour and 15 minutes. Today we only watched like 17 minutes of it because we did an introduction, a little intro of that, everything else that went along with it. The bulk of it we'll watch tomorrow, and then the following day, Thursday, we'll finish it up. And so, but as the video was playing, I thought I better quickly try to find that scene, make sure it's not coming up. So one of the things I was doing as the video was playing, as the students were answering the questions, was that I was trying to find that scene. I finally found it. And so I kind of wrote it down on a piece of paper when exactly that scene is coming up. So tomorrow, my plan is to continue from here. So we get started off, we stopped at 17 minutes, to continue from 17 minutes on through, I think it's like 52 minutes. All right, so we're gonna watch it for about 35 minutes tomorrow, which leaves me about 15 minutes of class left over. And so part of that will be the warm-up, and then part of that will be a discussion. And so that'll be the plan for tomorrow. So while that was going on, I was trying to figure that time frame out. So as the video was playing, that's one of the things I was doing. Another thing I was doing while the video was playing is I was actually doing some lesson planning, some grading. I had a 17-minute time frame there that the video was playing, so I had time to do other things. And so I have my watch here, and I have my timer going on the watch, so that way I'd make sure I pause the video and still have time for students to leave the classroom. So I make sure I did that. And then of course there's some other little housekeeping things I was taking care of. But as the video was playing, I was grading papers. I was doing a little bit of lesson planning, things of that sort. So that gives you a little bit more time. So if you add that up, you know, if I got, let's say 15 minutes times 5, that's like an hour that I can take care of stuff. So that way I have less things to do, you know, when we're all done at the end of the day. And so the other thing is I wanted to show you real fast was this right here. So this was the warm-up for today. This was the warm-up for today right here. And that's what students did when they first came to the class. Now the warm-up tomorrow is this. And this ties in with what they're going to learn about. So one thing I'm trying to figure out tomorrow is I only have, like I said, about 15 minutes. 8 of those minutes, or 7 of those minutes, is this. That only leaves me about 8 minutes of discussion, which is not much. Because what I want kids to walk away with, once again, those big 3 questions, you know, big 3 things I want them to walk away with is just understand how awful slavery was and kind of have a better perspective of what's going on in their life and just how resilient. And so I want there to be a little reflection, a little bit of class discussion, and I only got about 7 minutes to do that. So I'm not sure how that's actually going to play out tomorrow. If I have to do more discussion, less video, I'll definitely do that. I just want to keep in mind that one little part of the video I need to skip. And so looking here are the questions. Do you care about your education? What are your current grades? How much money does it cost to send you to school each year? Do you work hard? And give me an example when you worked hard. And so I'm hoping students will come in, they'll answer these questions. We'll have a little bit of class discussion, and then we'll compare their lives to that of a slave. Going back to that real big thinking question, you know, as far as trying to have a perspective on our own lives. You try to appreciate what we have going on right now. Because usually, because in the video it talks about how education, slaves were not allowed to be educated, and that just for reading a book or trying to read a book, they'd be punished. And how they went out of their way, they're risking their lives just to learn to read. And then a connection I'm going to make is, and here we are, we got students that it's hard to get them just to come to school, where back in the time, slaves would be willing to die for this opportunity. So I'm hoping to make that connection with them. And then of course the working hard part, you know, no matter what, you know, you complain about coming to school and the hard work and whatever else it is, I mean, at least we are not in the fields working at age 12. So I'm hoping to make those connections. So that'll be part of the discussion tomorrow. All right, things I have to do the rest of the day. Now there's no grading today because this is a 3-day assignment. And so I'm gonna have the students, once again, hold on the papers today, tomorrow, and they collect it on the 3rd day. So no grading today. I'm just gonna use the rest of the time I have right now to kind of make sure my desks are clean, make sure that's taken care of, as well just make sure everything's ready to go for tomorrow. Maybe take me about 15, 20 minutes to do all that, and then I'm done for the day. All right, everything it needs up there. Let's go, let's go. 6 minutes, 2 questions. Write the question and answer the questions. Write the questions left-hand side, answer the questions on the right-hand side. All right, so this is day 2 of a 3-day lesson. Our goal today is to continue watching the video, the slave narratives. We'll finish it tomorrow, but we'll get through a big chunk of it today. But before we go into the video, 2 questions for you, 2 questions for you. Here they go. Number 6 is, do you care about your education? That's question number 6. And number 7 is this, what are your current grades? Would anybody like some easy extra credit points and just answer question number 6? Heidi, what do you got? It's up to you. Do you care about your education? Yes. Why? Give me a real answer. Why? All right. Because if you don't care about it, if you get bad grades, your mom's going to get mad at you. All right. Anybody else want some easy extra credit points? Oh, we'll start with Juliana Marquez and then Yahir. Just number 6. Why do you want to do good in school, though? All right. So eventually you want to go to college, and so it looks good for college. Sounds good, Marquez? Why, sir? All right. Good for your life, future, college, I assume? All right. So it's hopefully get you to college. And you want to go to college because you want to get a good what? Good job, right? So better life, sooner on the streets. Got it. Yeah, what do you got for us? So yeah, here it says it's a necessity to do good in life, I guess, right? All right. Now, here's a question for you. Think about this. Is it really a necessity? Do you know anybody or have you heard of anybody that did not go to college and still successful? Yes, sir. Your dad. What does your dad do? You mind me asking? He wasn't military as an electrician. He was pretty good as an electrician, right? Yes. What? All right, and that's pretty good? You got here? Ooh. Hold on a second here. Hold on a second. So, yeah, here is saying, yeah, they dropped out, but they still have to do what? Huh. Is learning the same thing as going to school?
You can learn out of school.
You can learn out of school. You can learn in school. Marquez, you want to say something? Huh. All right. So, learning is not necessarily the same thing. Now, first of all, here's the reason I asked number 7, by the way. This is one of those things where the question I ask, do you really believe what you say you believe? Because if you answer number 6, do you care about your education? Yeah, and you say, yes, I care about my education. Then ask what grades you have, and you say I have an F or a D. That tells me what? Yeah, you really don't care. It's all talk, but you really don't care. You really don't. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that's not necessarily a bad thing. 100% transparent with you. If you're a flunky in this class, I don't think any less of you. I don't. I know it's a grade. I know it's a class and everything else. So I don't think less of you for getting a bad grade in this class or any class. To me, it does not define who you are necessarily. I'd rather you be a good person and flunk this class than be a bad person and ace this class. True story, I had some students, young ladies, I think it was last year or the year before. They were awesome. They both had A pluses. They always worked hard. They always did their work. You name it, they were like the perfect student. And then one time we're doing a test and they basically started copying. They started cheating on the test. And my response to that was, if you would have got an F for the test, it would not bother me one bit. But the fact that you were cheating says 2 things. It tells me about your character as a person that you are, and also tells me what you think about me. Because you're willing to cheat in this class means you really think less of my opinion. Also, it tells me about your character. The character being that I can't trust you. And so I told these young ladies, I said, here's the problem. You get a 0 for the test, and I really don't care about the test. But I can't trust you anymore. I mean, they was helping me out grading and this and that, but I said, I can't trust you. And that was it. That wasn't mean to them the rest of the school year. It wasn't like that. They're still in the class. But I just, you know how it is when you don't trust somebody? You can't always really let your guard down. You're always just kind of just looking at one. That's what it was. Your character means a lot more than anything else. Now, the other thing I've noticed, here's another thing, a character trait. So, think about it. I can honestly tell you that in 10 years, I am lucky if you remember just 5% of the stuff you learned in this class. I'm lucky if you remember just 5%. If you remember something from this class in 10 years, I'll be quite happy. So the material in this class, as much as I love it, it's not important for you to be successful in life. And I had to understand that. So then what's the point of this class? For me, what's important about this class in school itself, and I tell this to my kids all the time, I tell them, you know, it's not about necessarily what the grade is a reflection of your effort. And your effort is a reflection of your character and your discipline. Because how many of you actually really want to come here and take notes? Nobody wants to take notes. I don't want to take notes. How about a teacher meeting? I don't want to take notes. But it shows your discipline. Because if you're willing to do something that you don't want to do to get an outcome you're looking for, a good grade, high school, college, play sports, or something else, it says a lot about your character. That's called discipline. If you're willing to do what you don't want to do so you can have the results you're looking for, that is discipline. It's impressive. My wife and my son, they work out. Do you think they really like all that pain and all that? Some people love working out. But I mean, do you really want to be winded and tired and hurting? No. But they're doing it. They're doing something they don't want to do. My wife wakes up at 5 o'clock so she can work out. Do you think she really wants to wake up at 5 o'clock? No, she doesn't. But she does it so she can have, that's the discipline, so she can have the results she's looking for. And so for me, school is kind of like that testing ground. It gives you that opportunity to work on that self-discipline. And so that's, for me, is the importance of school. How we do that, what we learn about history, interesting, there's math, science, all these things are somewhat important, but it's the habits you create, for me, that are more important than anything else. With that said, let's continue the video. Here we go. Once again, the slave narratives. So go ahead and just put your warm-up to the side. Put your warm-up to the side. Question number 11 is what we're starting with. If you need a copy of this, if you for some reason don't have the questions, come up here and grab them. But question number 11 is what we're going to start with. All right, I'll pause right there. All right, bring it all back tomorrow. We're going to finish it tomorrow. So I just got done with day 2 of the lesson, and so far it's going pretty good. Just some quick feedback, some things that kind of I've changed today or things I'll alter, just so you have an idea of how today went. Overall, went pretty well. Things went pretty well as planned. The first thing is this. So I did some calculations before the video actually started, and I realized I had about 35 minutes of the video that I can play before I got to that one part of the video that I wanted to skip. And so this morning I thought, okay, well, how am I going to do this? And so what I decided was this. I decided to play the entire video from where we left off, which was around 17 minutes, to the next 35, so it kind of ended around 52 minutes of the video, play continuously. Now, the good thing about that is that I paused the video right before that particular scene I didn't want students to see. And then that ended class. So that timing was perfect. The bad thing about it is 35 minutes is kind of a long period for a student sometimes to stay focused. Now, luckily, my classroom manager's on point. There was no problem for kids kind of going crazy. But that's something you may want to consider when you do your lesson planning is try to chunk things. That's always kind of the advice I have is chunk things into smaller time frames. And by doing that, you have transitions between things. You usually end up with better classroom management. But luckily for me, nothing went crazy. So what happened today is I had my warm-up, and then I had a quick little discussion about the warm-up, and then 37 minutes of the video, or 35 minutes of the video, and paused right there before I hit that scene. Now, with that said, I made a quick adjustment because originally my warm-up, let me put it up here for you. Originally my warm-up is going to look like this. Do you care about your education? What are your current grades? How much money does it cost? Do you work hard? And give me an example of when you work hard. And then what I normally do is I connect this to what students are learning. So I connect this with the video, trying to get to the point just how much slaves went out of their way to try to learn, how they're willing to risk their life in order to learn. And then also the hard work. So going back to those 4 main ideas I'm trying to teach about slavery, I want to make sure students understand just how awful it was, give them perspective on their own life, how blessed we are, and the last thing I kind of want students to get from this entire lesson is the idea of just how powerful the human will is to keep moving forward, how resilient slaves were, and so forth. And so I'm trying to connect this back to it. But what I realized is because I was playing the video for 35 minutes, I only had, after they actually wrote this down, they would only have about 6 minutes to discuss all of this, and that wasn't enough time. So I quickly made a change, and here's the change I made. The change I made was this, that I just had them, just get it here. I just had them answer 2 of them, 6 and 7, just 6 and 7, that's all. And then we had a quick discussion about education, all right? So that is what I made a quick change on this. Now, with that thought, so tomorrow comes, and I, once again, as the video is playing, I'm working on other items, such as maybe some grading. I was doing some more lesson planning, and I was kind of getting prepared for tomorrow, thinking regarding the warm-up and the time frame. And so let me kind of show you what I do, at least my mental process. I know I have 50 minutes. So I have 50 minutes is how much our class period is, 50 minutes. And then the other thing is 19 minutes of that is going to be the video. So I counted how much longer it is from when I continue the video to the end. It's going to be 19 minutes. So that's 19 minutes. So that leaves me with 31 minutes of class left. And now the other part of it is I would need to give time for students to kind of wrap things up, to kind of count their points and all that. And you'll see how that happens tomorrow. So I want to give students 4 minutes at the end of the video to count their points. So I'm left with 27 minutes left, but then I need to give time for students to actually do their warm-up. And so here's the warm-up tomorrow. So what I'm going to do, actually, let's see here. What are your current grades? We did that. Okay. Let me refresh it here. So the warm-up tomorrow is going to be some more questions. And then, let's get that here for us. So this is going to be the warm-up tomorrow. 6, 7. Do you care? We did that already. All right, 8, 9, and 10. Do you work hard? Give me an example of when you worked hard, and what was the most surprising thing you learned so far? And I'm gonna give them 6 minutes to do this. Write this down and answer that question. So that's 6 minutes. So that leaves me a total of 21 minutes to have a class discussion. And so the class discussion, what I'm going to do is we're going to revisit all of these questions. We're going to revisit this question here. We're going to revisit this question right here. So these are the questions that we're going to discuss in our warm-up. Then we're going to discuss some of the questions that were on the worksheet. Not with the idea of giving the students the answer, but we're going to use those questions as springboards into a deeper conversation, touching upon just how horrible slavery was, touching upon how blessed we are, as far as work. I mean, my gosh, no, I don't care what kind of work I do, nothing compared to what slaves had to endure. And talk about the resilience of them, how after they finally got their freedom, how their life went. So we're going to use those questions to springboard into a classroom discussion. And so that is the purpose of those questions. One is keep the hands busy as they're working. Another can give a focus on what they're going to learn, but also to use that as a way of taking a classroom discussion. Kids are more willing to participate if they already have answers down versus just being put on a spot having to come up with an answer. And so 21 minutes is what I'm going to use as far as classroom discussion. So if I break down the time, it goes this way. We'll start with the warm-up. Forgive my horrible writing here. So we're going to start with the warm-up. It's going to take 6 minutes. Got it. We're going to start with the class discussion. Put down CD. That's going to be 21 minutes. And then we're going to watch the video, which is 19 minutes. And then basically we're going to wrap up the classroom, count the points. We'll put down end with 4 minutes. And that will be the entire class period. So when it comes time to actually planning out your lesson, like we did originally, there's going to be little changes here and there, but you want to go from bell to bell. And this is what it means to go from bell to bell. Have everything planned out. Now, I'm very neurotic. I always have my timer up there. You always see going. I have a timer on my watch that I always keep track of. So I got timers going all the time to remind me to go on to the next thing. The nice thing about this, you notice it's kind of chunked up a little bit, right? We have 6 minutes of warm-up. We have 21 minutes of classroom discussion, and that's kind of broken up because we're going bouncing from one student to the other. 19 minutes of the video, not too bad, and then 4 minutes to wrap it up. So that is another great system we have put in place. The final thing I just want to mention before we close out here is that I think you can see it over here. Teacher, student. I explained this on several different videos, what I use that as, but this is a way of keeping kids on track. So when they first come in and do the warm-up, if that class is a little noisy, I'll give myself points right here, and so that way it's a way of keeping the classroom focused. So watch one of my other videos, I explain that in more detail. And the final thing is, I noticed my periods 1, 2, and 3, there are a couple students that put their head down. And so what I'm doing is, when I'm at my desk, I'm keeping track of those students' names. And because what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to give them credit for the day. Chances are they're probably going to copy the answer to somebody else, and I don't think it's fair to the other students that actually were paying attention, doing the work, that they get the same score. And so knowing that and seeing that pattern, periods 4 and 5, and actually at the end of period 3, I made announcements, hey, if you put your head down, I can't give you credit for it today. And I'm happy to say periods 4 and 5, I believe everybody kept their head up. So that's another thing you can do. If you ever notice that you're playing videos and heads seem to go down, remind them at the beginning that if they put their head down, they're not going to get credit. And then you have to do your part to carry through and make sure you keep track of that, as well as make sure they deduct the points. So with that said, one more day to go. Let's see how it goes tomorrow. All right, here we go. So the plan for today is we're going to continue and finish our 3-day lesson. Once again, we're watching a video called The Slave Narratives, Unchained Memories. We've got video questions that we're doing as we're going along with this. So it is going to be due at the end of class today. It's going to be worth altogether about 50 points, worth quite a bit, 3 days worth of work. But before we continue the video, a couple things I want to go over as far as the questions go. Let's start with this. Let's go over a few of the questions. Let's start with that, and then we'll take it from there. So if you look at your paper, you should have your paper there in front of you that have the questions on it. Extra credit points, extra credit points. Was someone mind sharing with me the answer to number 2? Just give me like 1 or 2 states that you wrote down for number 2. So every time the video is playing, you're supposed to write down some real fast. Georgia, what do you give me 2 of them real fast? Go. Texas, Virginia. Diana. South Carolina, North Carolina. You're right, there's plenty more. Go for it. Georgia, Alabama. Malik. Virginia, North Carolina. Yes, ma'am. Missouri and Kentucky. Yes, sir. Alabama, Oklahoma. Anybody else? Yeah. So those are quite a bit. And so here's a map, and you'll definitely know more about them as we go on, because this is all part of the Civil War. But looking at this map, everything in green and purple is where slavery was allowed in the United States. So everything in green and purple is where slavery was allowed. And so you got it. You got Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, you name it. All of these is where slavery was allowed. That's a lot of states, isn't it? It's a lot of states. Once again, I want to stress that America was one of the last countries to give up slavery. Not the last, but one of the last ones to give up slavery. So it's so ingrained into our country. All right. So let's go through a couple of these, give you a chance for extra credit points, and we'll just talk about a little bit. Let's start with question number 8. Question number 8. Who would like some extra credit points? Answer question number 8. Ms. Spence, don't think we heard from you yet. Education. Make sure you get this down here. Make sure we got this. What was against the law for slaves to have? The answer is an education. And so you think, why do they not want slaves to learn to read or write, to have an education? The answer to that is because education is power. It really is. Education is power. Power, opportunities, you name it. Education is that valuable of a thing. Slaves knew that. Because think about it, if a slave could read and write, they could communicate better, they could talk to each other, they can find out what's going on in the world, they could find out ways to escape, they could find out people who are trying to help them, they can understand the bigger picture of the world. But without the education, they couldn't do that. And so some slaves were even willing to risk their lives to learn to read and write. And then here's the question I have for you. How many of you complain about coming to school each day? You don't have to answer that, by the way. But think about it. How many complain about coming to school each day? I always have the opinion that I think you guys do not appreciate school enough. By the way, I say you guys. If you don't fit in this category, just ignore me. But most people, most students complain about going to school. And it's because you do not understand. I think that if you had to pay to come to school, you would do much better at school. It costs us taxpayers, people paying taxes, about $10,000 to $12,000 a year to send you to go to school. That means in your lifetime, from kindergarten to 12th grade, us taxpayers are paying about $150,000 for you to have an education. And how many of you just sit around complaining about it? Slaves were willing to die for the opportunity that you guys have. And how many of you are just wasting that opportunity? Back to the question, do you care about your education? What grades do you have? If you have a D or F right now, you don't care. You don't. You don't see the value of it. You just don't. Now, once again, it's your future, it's your opportunity. The more education, the more opportunity you have. But there's going to come a point in your life where you have to realize that the only real person that you're hurting if by you not doing well at school is yourself. That's really what it comes down to. So just kind of keep that in mind. This year, next year, as you go through high school, slaves were willing to die for the opportunity that you have. And you have it for free. And you have it with people encouraging you to go to school. You have people here to try to help you learn. You have all these things in place to make you successful, but yet some people still just kind of squander that opportunity. That's why I want you to ponder that thought real fast. All right, let's keep going here. Next one. Number 9. Let's talk more about this here. Number 9. The question is this. By what age are slaves when they started working in the field? Let's go ahead, Mason. 12 years old. How old are you guys? If you lived back then and you were a slave, guess what you'd be doing right now? Working in the fields. Once again, back to the thing. How many of you complain about coming to school? Oh, school's so hard. I got to wake up so early. Oh, life's so hard. Oh, school's so boring. I got to sit there all day. Oh, I can't believe my parents took away my phone. Really? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm no better. I wake up days going like, oh, man, I got to go to work. Oh, man, I just don't feel good. Oh, I'm just so tired. And then I catch myself and I think, what am I complaining about? I think about all the jobs I've had. Here's the jobs I've had in my life. Good or bad, here they are. I think when I was in 7th grade, I had a paper route. So I'm a little paper route, riding my bike around, throwing papers. You know, that was my job. It was an evening route, luckily. Evening route. There we go. Paper route, right? 7th grade, no big deal. And then I think when I was a freshman, I got a job working at a dog groomer's. My job was to bathe dogs. Oh. All right? So I go home smelling like wet dog, you know? All right, that was it. Then my next job from there is I got a job at a pizza place. I go home smelling like pizza. My daughter said to me, I hate to be a pizza delivery person. I go, why is that? She goes, your car smells like pizza, like old pizza. And she's right. My car started smelling like old pizza, and drive around every day. That's my 3rd job I had. Then I became the manager of a pizza place, all right? Then I got a job working at Geico answering phone calls, and now I'm a teacher. So that's my job thing. And I think about the jobs I've had, none of them even come close to having to endure what they had to endure. Oh my gosh, I mean, wake up from morning to, they're working 12 hours straight. And we're not talking easy work. We're talking in the field, working in the heat, you name it, getting all cut up and everything else. The hardest thing I probably did physically ever did regarding work-wise, I remember as a kid I helped my dad pour cement for a couple of days. And I thought that was horrible work. But that's it. That's it. So back to us again. And I always think about this to myself. What am I complaining about? You guys have so much freedom. You have so many luxuries in your life that we take it for granted. I just hope that you get to a point in life where you can realize just how blessed you are. Don't get me wrong. There's some horrible things happening in the world. There's horrible things happening in my life, right? But if you can figure that part out, just how lucky we are, that's a life hack right there. So kind of keep that in mind when you start complaining about the problems you're going through. All right, let's see. Let's keep going here. What else we got? Let's do number 11. This gets serious right here. Number 11. Ian, what do you got for us? To humiliate their husbands. I have two daughters. And this is one of my biggest fears I have in my life, is that something horrible like this would happen to them. I lose sleep over it, thinking about something horrible like this would happen to them. And to think that women, slave women, they had no control over it. They really had no control over this. And that every day they lived in fear of something like that happening. And then the husbands, oh man, they had to know the things that they could not protect, or to protect their daughters or their wives. They were powerless in all of this. It just makes my stomach just sick thinking about the things they had to endure. Going back to the thing, I really want you to understand just how horrific slavery was. And that's just one example of it. Oh, let's keep going here. Whew. 12. On many plantations, what were public spectacles? Oh, it's all you. Ian, go for it, sir. Whippings. Did you guys follow along when they're describing what the whippings were like? I mean, it was brutal. I mean, they died sometimes because of just how severe the whippings were. They showed a picture. Let me show it for you in case you missed it. This is probably one of the more famous pictures out there. And what happened, by the way, this picture is famous because this guy kind of made it to the north, and then the Northerners found out about how serious slavery was. But look at this guy. That's not uncommon. And they talked about how when they whipped them, they went like a checker mark, right? They went this way and this way, this way and this way. Because what it would do was tear up the skin. Could you imagine? I mean, I get a splinter and I'm a baby about it, you know what I'm saying? Could you imagine having to endure that and your skin's peeling off your back because it's being ripped by the whip? And to make it even worse, at the end, extra credit points here, what do they pour in the wound sometimes as an extra punishment? You ready? Salt. Try that next time. Get a cut and put salt in it. All right? And they're talking about how the skin was quivering and everything else just from man. I don't know what the hardest things you ever had to endure. But that's part of it. You know, a lot of times when we actually start talking about slavery, there'll always be a student or two that say, well, I wouldn't let them do that to me. You know, and there were slaves. There were slaves that fought back. But the reality is, if you were a slave and you fought back, most likely you'd be dead. Or even worse. And they're talking about the video coming up. They're talking about there were slaves that tried to escape. But if you got caught, I mean, if you're running, here's one thing. If you're a runaway slave and you get caught, they bring you back and they cut your Achilles right back, your tendon back here, I think it is. So you basically can't run anymore, right? They cut that. You'll see it also. They put like a little thing around your head, like a little. You'll see in the video coming up. Well, not quite shaka, but yeah, it's a collar around. And so it's the fact that some slaves actually still made it was great, but the reality is not many slaves actually made it to freedom. So, all right, let's keep going here. Keep going. So these are what I'm hoping once again from all this is you just understand how horrific slavery was. and then also appreciation for the freedoms that we have and the blessings that we have. No matter what you're going through your life, I mean, nothing compares to what they had to endure. Number 13, what did most ex-slaves live in after slavery was over? Does anybody have an answer for us on that one? Number 13, going once. Ian, you're racking up 3 points. But Ian, I'm going to give you extra credit points, but I want you to choose a person or a number. What would it be, sir? What's it going to be? 35 all the way. Georgia. It's you. Stupid last names like that. I know. I feel your pain on that one. Georgia. There we go. Where'd it go here? No, what did most ex-slaves live in after slavery was over? Number 13. Did you get the answer? Was that? Well, that's what the quarters are made of, kind of like a log cabin. But when slaves were free, here's what. Did you get when slaves were freed? No problem. Here we go. Ready? When slaves were freed. Think about this now. You're a slave, right? This is the whole life you know is slavery. And one day somebody comes to you, because slavery is now over, and they tell you, hey, you're free now. What does that mean to you? Yeah, I'm free. But where are you going to go? So where are you going to go? Yes, sir. Well, you have an apartment. You have the money to pay for an apartment. Right? Malik? What's the answer? Poverty. Poverty means you're very poor. So here's the thing I want you to understand. Slavery eventually does come to an end. Eventually does come to an end. Civil War. But just because slavery ends, I don't want you to think that suddenly everything's all great for these former slaves. Far from it. Life is still very tough. You're living in poverty. You're very poor. You have nothing. You have absolutely nothing. If one day, let's say tomorrow, you woke up, your family is gone, you have no house, nothing, what are you going to do? And so they're like, yes, free, but now what? Now what? And they figure it out, but the bottom line is it's still very hard for them afterwards. And most of them still live in poverty, meaning they're poor after all this happens. Here we go. Let's go ahead and, okay, number 16. 16. Please go ahead. Diana? 16. So on Saturday nights, what did slaves have the opportunity to do? One of the answers, they went to church on Sunday, but what do they do on Saturday nights? Jaslyn? Courting. That basically means they can go hang out with each other, right? They hang out, maybe go to another farm nearby, court, hang out, dance. So here's the other thing that amazes me is we just talked about all the horrible things that slaves had to endure. Horrible things. But yet, amongst all those horrible things, they're able to find joy and happiness in there. Do you know how? Think about this. Think about your own life. And I know some of you are going through some horrible things. But here is the secret of life. If you're able to find joy in the worst times of your life, that is so empowering. That is the goal of life right there. Think about it, ready? Why do you want an education? I want to get an education so I get a job. Why do you want to get a job? So that I can have some money. Why do you want some happy? So I can be what? Happy, right? Joy. If you can figure out how to have the happiness and joy in the worst circumstances, you won the game of life. That's the ultimate goal. People want to be happy. But if you can figure out how to do that with very little, you already won the game. And the fact that these slaves blows me away. Saturday night, they're hanging out with other slaves. They're able to find happiness. They're able to find joy. They can celebrate. Amongst all of these horrible things going on, they can still find little glimmers of joy and happiness. That is so empowering. Because I think to myself, oh my gosh, that goes to the human spirit. I teach history, and so you learn about horrible things that have happened in the past. Holocaust, you name all those things. And the number one thing is finding that will to survive If you can find the will to survive and find the joy in things, man, it's powerful. It keeps you going. And so when I think to myself, my gosh, if they could endure all those horrible things and still find happiness, why can't I? I've had some things in my life, people I love pass away, some major surgeries going on, you name it, different things going on. And there's some low points in my life. But I can tell you, through it all, I'm learning, still not there yet though, but I'm learning to find the joy in the hard times. The sooner you can figure that out, the better off you are in life. So work on that. I know you guys are still young, but work on that. Try to figure out who you are, what you believe, and try to figure out that joy aspect of it. All right? And I think one last one. Let's kind of back it up a little bit here. Actually, we'll kind of end it there. All right. So here's what's coming up. First of all, question number 20. Question number 20. That's what we're going to start with. Question number 20. The other part about it is, as a friendly reminder, if you put your head down, you do not get credit for today. There's a lot of you that lost credit the past 2 days. So if you put your head down either yesterday or the day before, just know you didn't get credit for that day. So just kind of keep that in mind. So make sure you keep your head up. So even if you have the answers, I still can't give you credit if you put your head down. So make sure you keep your head up. And so we're going to start with number 20. And this last part here, what they're going to talk about, they're going to talk about how some slaves did try to escape, what happened to them, how some of them found freedom. They'll talk about the end of the war and eventually how the slaves were set free. So that'll be the last bit of this. So here we go. Let's get to it. All right, now it's time for you to get all the points that you've earned, all your hard work, time for it to pay off. So here's what you're looking at. Here's what you're looking at. You have two different assignments. You got two different assignments. One assignment is your warm-up, all right? Your warm-up is going to be put in this bin over here. So as you're leaving, you're going to put your warm-up in this bin over here. Make sure your name is on that warm-up. The other assignment is the video questions. You're going to put those in here as we are leaving. Once again, make sure your name is on it. But before you turn it in, you got to count your points. If you don't count your points, you don't get credit. So make sure your name is on it, and then here's how you're going to count the points. For the warm-ups, you're going to give yourself half a point for each question, half a point for each answer. Half a point for each question, half a point for each answer. Go ahead and count that now for your warm-ups. Half a point for each question, half a point for each answer. Why is it confusing? Half a point. One question is half a point. Two question is 1 point. Oh my gosh, you're... It's not that. How about this? Every two is 1 point. So every question and answer is 1 point. How's that sound? So count them up. Or count it all up, divide by 2, same thing as half. My goodness gracious, people. What you guys are... So half a point for each question, half a point for each answer. Count it all up, put the total at the top. Next thing is the video questions. It's 2 points for each answer. How you doing? You need me to sign something? Okay, here and here. All right. There we go. Today's date is the 4. There you go. Thank you. That's mine. Thank you. So for the video question, give yourself 2 points for each answer. Now the part where it says, make sure each question, each answer can only have 2 points. So question number 2, only count that as 2 points, all right? Don't count each one of those as an answer. So each question, the most you get for is 2 points for each answer. Count that all up, put the total at the top. And then if you want to know what you earned grade-wise, you can look up here to see what you earned grade-wise. 9 or higher for the warm-up is an A. 36 or higher for the video questions is an A. That tells you how you did. So when the bell rings in about a minute and a half, once again, over there goes the warm-ups. Over there goes the video questions. Make sure you put in the right spot, otherwise you probably will not get credits. Any questions? We got about a minute or so. Go ahead and pack it up. Just make sure your name is on both of those items. Well, day 3 is over, and so the lesson is now concluded. A couple things I want to point out about today, in case you didn't see them in the videos or in case I haven't pointed out just yet. The first one is this. The grading worked wonderfully. What I did is I had students, and I think the videos kind of mentioned that already, I had the students put their work in 2 separate bins. So there's a bin over there was for the warm-up, there's a bin over there for the video questions. And then as they're leaving, and here's the key, they put in there as they're leaving. Because before I would say, okay, you know, when you're done counting your points, go ahead and put it in the bins. The next thing I know, the last 4 minutes is all chaotic. Students are up, walking around. And so my instruction and what I've been doing for a long time now is, as you're leaving, put your work in the bin. And so bell rings, then they finally get up and leave, and on the way out, they put it in the right spot. So that is a little side tip there that kind of helps things out a little bit. And the other thing is this right up here. Students count their points. Students count their points. So every student knows before they leave what grade they earned. And I find this is a way of just reinforcing that, you know, what the work they're doing, they do get rewarded for it. And if they're not working, they're not getting a point. Some students think just from showing up, they'll get points and pass the class, which is not true. And so this is immediate feedback on how they did the previous 3 days. And so you look up here for the warm-up, it just tells them exactly, they count their points up, it tells you what grade they earned. And then for the video question, same thing, they count the points up, it tells you what grade they earned. So before students leave, they'll know exactly what grade they earned for the previous 3 days they've been watching this video and doing the assignment. So I found this is a very helpful thing. And I'm not sure if you see it up there. We don't need to go over that, but on the very top, I actually have out the GPA and everything else too, in case they need another reminder of that. So those are some things I wanted to point out. Now regarding the grading, here's the great thing about it, is I actually have a teacher aide, she came in 3rd period, and she did some of the grading for me already. So you think about it, I have 2 assignments, 5 periods each. So that means there's a total of 10 sets of papers I have to grade. She already graded 3 of those. So I only have 7 more. And the reality is, since the students already counted their grades, it's easy to do another grade. And I don't even have to do the grading myself. What I'll probably do is either tomorrow, which is Friday, we're playing an online game, it's called Book It. I'll just ask one kid, I say, hey, do you want to grade some papers instead of playing Book It? And I'll give them some extra credit points. They're happy because they get extra credit points. I'm happy they do the grading. And so before tomorrow is up, I should have all the grading done. So that's roughly about a 3 days worth of work, all done grading the following day, and I could put it into the computer. Now, to give you more detail, if I wanted to, I could have used today, if I wanted to grade it myself, I could have graded it myself. As students, for example, period 1 turns into work. As period 2 is watching the video, then I would have time to do some grading during that period. So the idea is planning things out to the point that you're going to find, once again, you're going to find yourself having these little nuggets of time you didn't expect, little pockets of time you didn't expect. And if you're organized enough, you can get a lot done in that time period. So the video is playing, let's do some math here, 20 minutes roughly, 5 periods. That's about 100 minutes I had to work on stuff as the video is playing. Regarding the lesson in general, it went pretty well. There's some pretty good discussions. Once again, each class is different. My period 2 and 3 are usually better discussions. Period 1 was like pulling teeth. Period 4 and 5, are so-so. But overall, it was a pretty good discussions, and that's what I was hoping for, using those questions as discussion. The only real hiccup in today's lesson plan was my 5th period. And we're about 5 minutes into class, and next thing you know, the fire alarm goes off. Oh boy, right? Fire alarm goes off. And so we do the whole fire thing, we got our backpacks, and we take outside, and we go to the staging area and everything else. Altogether, it wasn't too bad actually. Altogether, it probably took about 15 minutes to kind of go through the whole fire drill. It was a false alarm, by the way, but a fire drill process, right? 15 minutes, and so we come back here. So now the nice thing about the system we have is I knew exactly when to start the video, right? I knew, based upon our calculations yesterday, that I had 21 minutes to have a class discussion. And so we came back and I realized out of that 21 minutes, I only had about 6 minutes left because the whole fire thing took about 15 minutes. And so I wasn't panicked, I wasn't panicked because I knew exactly how much time it was for the video to play. And so I had 6 minutes. And so I used about 3 of those minutes to kind of give them feedback on how they did for the fire alarm. And then I used 3 minutes for a quick little discussion. So the bottom line is this, that if you have it structured and you know the time frames it's going to take during each period, if something comes up like that, you can quickly recover and continue the lesson. So all in all, even though there's a hiccup, a lot of times that might ruin things. Because we're so well prepared, we had no problem at all picking it up from exactly where we left off at. Less discussion, but we're still able to get through the video. So that was another kind of interesting thing that happened today. All right, I think that's it for now. Let's go and dive deeper into what we're going to do next. This was a lot of information we covered. Once again, taking the process from A to Z, from beginning to end. And I'm hoping you got a lot of value out of it. A couple other things that you want to keep in mind as you're going forward with the lesson planning, and that is this, that this is a marathon. I really want you to think this is a marathon. It is great to have this format down. It is great to have a process and a procedure on how to lesson plan. But what you're going to find is the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and you start building this catalog of lessons. I've been doing this 20 years, and so there are some lessons I've done that I know that work, and there's lessons I've done that didn't work, and so I throw those out and get new ones in. And so I'm constantly updating what I'm doing, but I have this huge catalog of resources and things I can go back to time and time again, and then once in a while I can add new things as each year comes upon us. So with all that said, go forth and lesson plan, and if you ever need any assistance, please feel free to reach out.